Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We start the 20th meeting of the Standing Committee on Finance. And I would like to first welcome all our new members and the former members. We have a nice quorum of 17 SCF members out of 20 around the table. And I would also like to welcome, as usual, our observers, our webcast audience, representatives of the operational entities, and all other stakeholders joining to our meeting. We have I counted 4 new members, and I'm going to give them a floor in a moment to introduce themselves. But I would like to also thank our previous members for their services and dedication they have shown to the agenda of the Standing Committee on Finance. Unfortunately, one of our members, Mrs. Diane Black from Antigua, at the last moment had to cancel her participation, and she's sending her apologies. I would now like to give a floor to our SCF members to very shortly present themselves, and also especially to the new members to say a few words if they so wish. We start from Vicky, please.
Good morning. I'm Vicky Noens from Belgium. I've been a SCF member since 2017, and I work for the Department of Environment and Spatial Development of the Government of Flanders.
Good morning, all. My name is Toru Sugio. I'm from Japan, and I'm from Japanese Foreign Ministry. Thank you. And this is my second SCF following last October. Thank you.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Fiona Gilbert from Australia. I'm here representing the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. This is my second SCF meeting, but the first as a formal member, so it's lovely to be here with you all.
Good morning, colleagues. Matthias Strömrich from the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, my second SCF meeting.
I thought this was new members, sorry. Randy Caruso from the United States, and I've been on the committee for a couple cycles now.
Good morning, my name is Ivan Zambrana from Bolivia, and this is my second year as a committee member.
My name is Paul Oquist. I'm from Nicaragua, where I work in my day job as Minister Private Secretary of National Policy in the Presidency of the Republic, and I've been here for longer than I can remember.
Good morning, my name is Pieter Terpstra. I'm from the Netherlands. I work for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I'm a climate policy coordinator working on climate finance for the past 7 or 8 years, and I think this is my third year in the SCF. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jong-un Lee. I'm from Republic of Korea. I'm working at Ministry of Economy and Finance. It's my second year of SCF.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gabriella Blatzer. This is my first meeting of the SCF, but I've been in the climate finance community for a while, working for Switzerland, the Swiss Federal Office for the Environment.
Good morning, I'm Delphine Hérault. I'm working with the French Ministry of Ecological and Solidarity Transition, and this is my first meeting as a formal SCF member.
Good morning. I'm Sergei Chesnoy from Russia. It's also my first meeting as a member of the Standing Committee on Finance.
Good morning, my name is Zariun. I'm from Ethiopia, Ministry of Finance. I'm a new member to the SCF.
Good morning, Zaid Fakir from South Africa, from the Department of Environment. It's my second year on the SCF, representing the African constituency.
Good morning, I'm Mohammed Nasr from Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Egypt. I don't know how many years, most probably it's the second year or the third year, but I represent also the African constituency. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ayman Shasley. I am a SCF member representing Asia Pacific Group.
And my name is Ismail Vil. I work for the European Commission, and I'm representing European Union as a party to the Climate Convention. Thank you for those presentations, and I would like to also underline that we are taking our aim for transparency very seriously, which is why the meeting will be webcast. But if at a certain point of time the committee decides that the webcast should be turned off because of our reasons of deliberations, then at those moments the webcast could be interrupted. And I would like to also welcome the observers who are invited to participate, to take into account our time constraints and the smooth management of our agenda. And finally, we are continuing with our pilot program of ensuring virtual participation to our NGO constituencies. This has been deemed very useful. We started that process or this pilot at our 19th meeting, and I would also like to welcome now those NGO constituencies that are participating through this facility. I understand there are 2 entities that are connected. I would also like to inform you that Ayman and myself, we had a couple of weeks ago a webinar, a call with conference call with the NGO constituencies, and we discussed a little bit. We presented our tentative agenda and the work plan of the SCF for this year. There will be a summary note of that webinar that will be circulated. I understand the Secretariat is working on it. And also the stakeholders who are participating through the virtual facility will have possibilities making questions and comments through that mean of communication. We would like to. Randy, you want to take the floor?
Yeah, just a question of clarification. So for the webcasting, that was in relation to the plenary, or that was for both the plenary and the breakout groups? Your comment.
Yeah, well, it was not exactly on this point, but I can also try to answer on that. So there is a webcast of the plenary, and of the second breakout group, there will be a virtual communication in the second breakout group. But for this, we also have the virtual participation now already possible. Does it answer your question?
Yes, it was just a generic statement that the media, the SCF 20 will be webcast unless someone requested that it not be webcast. I was seeking clarification as to whether that was just in relation to the plenary or both plenary and the breakout groups, because I think I think that's the default working. That should be the default approach for the plenary, but we would have to discuss further that in relation to the breakout groups.
Yeah. Yeah, so we continue business as usual, meaning that if at any point of time the SCF member, any SCF member wants to have the webcast discontinued, then that's the business as usual that we discontinue it. But otherwise, the business as usual is that we have the webcast, and in the second breakout group, we have the virtual participation. Is it clear? So now we are being webcast, okay? That's the default, and that will stay on. When we have the breakout groups, this room, there's going to be one breakout group in this room, the webcast will be on. In the second breakout group, there's going to be the possibility for the virtual participation. Now, if there are objections to that, then that will be turned off. That's the default.
I think that's fine for us to get through today, but I just want to make clear the default from past practice was always the decision was that we would webcast the plenary, but not the breakout groups. There was never a conscious decision that just because one breakout group may be in the same room that where the plenary was going on and where we had webcasting going on, that one would then just so happen to be webcast. That was kind of what happened, but it was never a conscious decision. There was always a distinction between the plenary and the breakout groups. Like I said, I think for today we're fine, but I think we should just clarify the actual practice going forward. But I don't want to waste a lot of time on that now, so maybe we can just.
Yeah, well, thanks, Randy. We're going to be having an agenda item on the organization of work, and we can discuss this more in detail. But again, the point here was on this pilot of virtual participation that is suggested to be continued because there has been positive feedback on that. And on the other points, we can come back to that. No? Okay, good. So we agree. I'm hearing no other objections for this approach for the time being. Okay, and do we have the virtual participants on the line? Could you please introduce yourself?
I'm going to go first. Hi, my name's Mary Stewart. I'm representing the Business and Industry Observers. I'm from the Business Council for Sustainable Development Australia, and through them the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Thank you very much for letting us join this call.
Thank you as well. I'm Tara Daniel, representing the Women and Gender constituency, and I'm based in the Women's Environment and Development Organization.
Thank you. We have invited 4 different stakeholders to participate virtually, and the others may perhaps join later on. But before turning to the other agenda items, I would like to propose that as the SCF, we observe a moment of silence, and there's going to be a short video also giving tribute for the passing of our former co-chair, Madame Bernadetta Müller, and who was widely recognized for her contributions to this process and for the functioning of the SCF. So colleagues, would you please stand up for a moment of silence? Thank you. And could I ask the Secretariat to play the video? Thank you. Thank you, Secretariat, for this video that I believe is touching and sending a very personal message to all of us. And again, thank you, Bernadette, for your contributions. I would now like to hand over to my co-chair, Ayman, moving on to the second agenda item on the elections of officers. Ayman, please.
Thank you very much, everyone. Good morning, colleagues. I'd like to draw your attention to the second item, which is the election of officers. In accordance with Decision 2CB16, Annex 6, Paragraph 4, the Standing Committee on Finance shall elect annually a chair and vice chair among its members for a term of 1 year, with one being a member from non-Annex 1 party and one being a member from Annex 1 party. In Decision 5CB18, Paragraph 7, parties decided that the chair and vice chair of the SCF shall serve as co-chairs of the SCF, effective from the first meeting of the SCF in 2013. With this, I'd like to open the floor for nominations of the next co-chairs of the SCF. The floor is open. I recognize Zahir. Zahir, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. On behalf of the developing countries, I would like to nominate the Yoda of Saudi Arabia, the Jedi Knight and Supreme Leader. We know that the Force is strong in him, so I'd like to nominate Ayman Shasli as the co-chair from the developing country constituency.
Thank you very much, Zahir. We take note of that. Peter, please.
Yes, thank you very much, colleagues. And from Annex 1 parties also, we have somebody in whom the force flows very strong, which you would like to propose, Ismo Uvila, to be the co-chair.
Thank you very much for that. Paul, please.
I would like to second the nomination made by Sahir Vaimin Shashli to continue as co-chair.
Thank you very much, Paul. Well, I see no further calls for the floor. With this, it gives me a great pleasure to propose that the SCF elect my fellow co-chair, Ismo, and myself to be your co-chairs for 2019 until the first meeting of 2020. It's first standing committee meeting of 2020. With this, and hearing no objection, we don't have the gavel here, but then it is so decided. Thank you very much for that. Look forward to working with you, Ismo. Appreciate it. Now, let me hand over back to you, I guess, or is it still mine? Huh? Well, thank you very much. Paul, yes, you have the floor.
I would like to request that the Secretariat provide a gavel for the co-chairs.
Thank you very much. We're looking for it. We'll find it at some point of time. But normally we defer the gaveling to the last day when we really reach decisions. So can we perhaps, yeah. But it's already been gavelled. Thank you very much. Moving on, let me continue with you on the, give you a brief of the retreat that we had yesterday. Over the course of the retreat, the SCF members were able to engage on a range of topics, including the historical context of the SCF, lessons learned over its 8 years of activities, major achievements and challenges, as well as the future role of the SCF post-2020 and beyond within the climate finance landscape. Members enjoyed an open, honest dialogue and frank exchange of views. There was several general viewpoints expressed that the current working arrangements of the committee would be sufficient to deliver on the various products of the SCF and could be revisited depending on the thematic areas of work. Several achievements of the SCF were also highlighted, including the finalization of arrangements between the CUB and the GCF, the biennial assessment and overview of the climate finance flows, and the SCF forum. There were also some views expressed in relation to the usability of the technical products of the SCF and also strengthening outreach, including having a structured plan. May I wish to add, would there anybody wish to add any further comments to the retreat we had yesterday? These were basically the takeaway of yesterday's discussion, this general, open, candid discussions, and we discussed, the current state of play for the SCF, and I think that was very productive, and we all enjoyed the exchange. Perhaps we can continue this practice down the road if need be for it. Would anybody wish to take the floor to reflect on yesterday's engagement, discussions? Well, thank you very much. Hearing none, let me then hand over to Ismo, please. Ismo.
Thanks, Ayman. We're moving to item number 3, which is on the organizational matters. I would like to start first by just reminding our members, colleagues, that we have circulated to you our suggested priority areas for work. It is the 2-pager, one piece of paper that you have received that sums up our main areas of business this year. Would you have any? Let me just have this round of first comments here. Would anybody have any comments on that piece of paper to those suggested areas of work before we move on the agenda. Hearing none, I understand we agree on those priorities. And let me now move on the provisional agenda that has also been circulated via email. Would any of the members have any comments on the provisional agenda for this meeting that we have circulated? Peter, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think you're referring, to the tentative schedule, which was sent around, was it yesterday, today? So we have a number of breakout groups, which I think is good, but we also had the practice that we have different items at the same time and make sure that not like two similar items are always at the same time. And one of the problems that I have with this program, and maybe for the co-chairs or the secretary to think about, is that the breakout group on the first report and the determination of needs on day 1 and day 2 is at the same time as the breakout group on the forum. Now Mo and I will have to chair the forum, which means that we can not attend any breakout group on the needs determination, which I think would be a pity, because I would like to engage in that as well, and I'm sure Mo would like to as well. So maybe that's something that can be looked into, to make sure that we also have the opportunity to participate in those. Thank you.
Perhaps we take 1 or 2 more comments if there are any, and then we try to respond to those. Anybody else? Matthias, please.
Thanks. Yes, I'd share Peter's views on that. It would be helpful if we could arrange for all committee members to be present at those discussions, which we would want to engage in. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for those comments. Now we are fully equipped, locked and loaded. It is a challenge, and you rightly pointed out that we are trying to be each of us in 2 different locations, and when there are important topics, how do we ensure that we can participate in a most efficient way? When we discussed the whole concept of the breakout groups yesterday, I mean, the outcome was that it was felt that because we are having time constraints, we have to try to maximize the use of the breakout groups. So this was our proposal in order to try to squeeze this meeting within the time limits we have available. Now, our concrete proposal would be that for today we keep the tentative agenda as it is, and after today's meeting, Ayman and myself are going to revisit the schedule together with the Secretariat to see how we can reorganize the planning of the breakout groups for tomorrow, creating this space, if possible, to adjust it so that there could be more enhanced participation by all the members. Would that be acceptable to Peter and Matthias? Okay, thank you. And also, Lando pointed out that if anybody has printed out the older version of the tentative agenda, there is a new version now of the tentative agenda, On the second breakout group of today, so instead of the 2019 work plan, it is that breakout group is now for the guidance. It is in the electronic version that has been sent to you, but just if anybody has the older version. Randy, please go ahead.
So then can you clarify when you said earlier that one of these breakout groups will have the enhanced virtual participation? Which one were you intending that to be?
Okay, so I have to correct myself. So Lando is now telling me that both groups both breakout groups will have the virtual participation. Originally we were thinking only for one, but now the plan is to have it in both groups. Yeah. Randy, you want to come back on this?
Yeah, again, okay, I think for today this is fine, but we had, at our last meeting, it was clear that we needed to have a further discussion on whether or not, as a standard practice, we would webcast breakout groups going forward. So we still have not taken a decision on that. I think it still would be worth clarifying. I actually don't think it's going to be that big of a problem. I think we can come to a reasonable arrangement on that. But if enhanced virtual participation is just equals webcast, then it's still the same conversation as before. If it's webcasting plus a chat room or whatever, then I think we still, need to have that conversation in order to make any decision that extends beyond today and how we'll handle things. But for today, completely fine.
Yeah, thank you. So just to clarify, so this is the continuation of the pilot. It's not an established practice, and if you wish, we may have a discussion on this agenda item. On the modus of the participation, so this is virtual participation for those stakeholders who may not have a physical presence in the room. And otherwise the standard mode of conducting the webcast applies. It's the second pilot phase of the virtual participation. If you want to have a formal discussion on this, we may come back to this point later on during this meeting. But my understanding is that this is a test case on how we could increase the transparency and have more possibilities for our stakeholders to participate to our meetings. Okay, so if there are no other comments on the agenda, so for the purposes of this meeting, this agenda is now adopted as it is with those comments and modifications. Decided. And as we discussed yesterday, this is a year when we only have planned for 2 meetings, meaning that the time will be of very limited essence, and also bearing in mind that we have a new mandate as decided by COP24 on providing a report on the determination of the needs. So my co-chair and myself, we are really inviting you to be as concise, as focused, and as constructive as possible for the purposes of meeting our deadlines and being able to deliver in this meeting. We will be aiming closing sharply the meetings at due time. And the official closing time at 1700 hours is a very tight one. And that means that we have to really work together to have those relevant decisions and to maintain the quorum also at all possible moments so that we can be as efficient as possible. Moving on, we have circulated a table for members to, as is the standard practice for the SCF members, to sign up to the SCF working groups and also to show your interest to be involved with the work of the different other constituted bodies. You have received that electronically by email. That updated table now is what you have expressed to the other committee meetings members to be willing to contribute on and where you would like to engage. Obviously, all working groups are open for all the SCF members. Would anybody have any comments to that table, to those assignments to the constituted bodies before we move to the next agenda item? Vicky, please.
Yes, good morning. On the second table, which is about the constituted bodies, I do think it's crucial that we have for each constituted bodies 2 SCF members because it's sometimes very difficult to keep up. For instance, I'm responsible for technology-related matters. They have a meeting next week, but I won't be able to attend because I have the own in-country review. So I hope that we can get 2 members for each of the constituted bodies. Thank you.
Thanks, Vicky. Anybody else? Paul, please, and Vicky, could you take your flag down, please?
Randy and myself are the representatives of this committee before the Warsaw Mechanism on Losses and Damages, which is going to meet in early April. Also in early April is the meeting of the standing of the Green Climate Fund's first consultation on the replenishment process, which will take place in Oslo. So I've requested the Secretariat for support just for Oslo to Bonn to be able to fulfill that commitment in person and represent the committee. I haven't had the chance to talk to Randy yet, what his situation is, but it would guarantee a presence of the Green Climate, of the Standing Committee on Finance in the Warsaw Mechanisms deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And I have Gabby and Delphine next.
Thank you, Ismo. It's more a question of clarification. Since being a new member, I'm not used to all the instruments you work with. So these 2 tables indicate areas of work, but for example, agriculture and forest, I'm not quite aware that there's active work ongoing. So I was wondering why we have to dedicate people to that work stream if the work stream is not active at this point, which of course doesn't prevent us from when a new work stream comes up, we dedicate new members, but that was just a question. And then I would share Vicky's point in terms of having 2, ideally 1 from each constituency for every for every constituted body. And then I was wondering whether you wanted to have our interest raised right now, or should we just do that in the break directly with the Secretariat?
Thank you. And Delphine and Paul, could you take your mic off, please?
Yes, and in complement to Gabby's point, I was wondering whether you were seeking for expressions of interest in terms of participation in the working group members, or should we do that later?
Yeah, sorry. And then we have Mohammed.
Thank you so much. The first part, which is the work related to the SCF, I'm fine with the forum. I'm continue doing that. But on the adaptation matters, because I have some extra duties starting from this year, so it will be challenging for me to continue, or like even to have full engagement on the adaptation related matter, especially that it has a lot of bodies that are there. I don't know if Peter will be able to continue, because I know also he has additional charges starting mid this year. So just to highlight that, if we have other colleagues also to follow with us, especially from the new ones, be interested in joining this team. Because if you look at the adaptation matters, you have the adaptation committee, the expert group of the LDCs, the LEG, and the National Adaptation Plans Task Force. It's a lot of things. So just wanted to highlight that most probably I will be looking forward to have more people with us in this team. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for those comments. What I suggest is that we give to the SCF members till the end of today course of business if you want to sign up to more of the working groups. So the Secretariat, I was just confirming with Lando, the Secretariat will have the table. You can come to sign up physically your name to the table. It is true that there are some areas where I think we should have a little bit more members participating. Because we all have also our own daily work, and sometimes there might be physical and other constraints to ensure our participation. On the work streams that are not that active, I think those work streams, even if they are inactive, and I don't think that we should try to make them more active than what they are, but I think that it's just that if something comes up, we should have somebody who is keen to follow that particular area. That would be my response. I'm not trying to generate more work for us, but just to make sure that we cover all the possible thematic areas while focusing on our key mandates. Randy, you still want to come in on this? And Ivan was first.
Thank you. Just to clarify, again, the work program or the work plan is a prioritization of topics. That doesn't mean that we have to neglect our mandates, because they are still ongoing. In particular, the coherence and coordination on finance for forests is something that is tied to the evolution of what is happening in the, for example, Green Climate Fund, and it's something that has to be tracked in order to carry out the mandate. So that's something that I think is important. We all are aware of. Thank you.
And Randy, please.
Yes, just to try to make a possibly helpful suggestion is, I think what's causing some confusion is this two different kind of groups of things, and I do agree that 3 of these things are not like the others in the first section. So maybe what we can do is have the first section just be the first 4, because these are, and then the distinction becomes, the first group is things where the SCF is very actively working on its own product on one of these, and I think everyone agrees that's kind of a clear logic of what's going on with the first 4. And then the second, you don't even have to change the titles. It's because it's collaboration with constituted bodies / thematic areas, coherence and coordination, financing for forests, agriculture, gender and climate finance. Those, I think, read more as thematic areas. So maybe that just might help improve the logic and make it clearer of what's being captured here.
Yeah, thanks. Sounds like a good plan, and I think indeed it would clarify, and notably So, sorry, Vicky, you want to come in on this?
Not specifically on this, but it's just, I know we will come back to it in a breakout group, but as I don't know if I could attend, I also want to bring us back that during the retreat, we thought about something still to discuss, but I just wanted to know, to think about different events taking place in 2019 and assign certain SCF members. If this is agreed later during the meeting, that there's also something that should be included in a different table then, but in the same document. I just wanted to raise it. Sorry for taking the floor again.
Yeah, thank you, Vicky. This is indeed something that we discussed yesterday in our retreat, and I was expecting somebody to take this up. The proposal is that we would, well, first we would readjust the table according to Randy's proposal, and that we would have yet a third table added to this, which would be basically summing up different events this year that are related to our work. And what we discussed yesterday was that there would be a possibility for our members, the SCF members who are participating to those events, also simultaneously to explain, to represent the SCF and to explain in those events what the SCF is doing. So there would be the Secretariat would be amending, perhaps make a proposal for this third table. Perhaps we could try to fit everything on just 2 pages to make it user-friendly. And then you could also sign up to those different events in the course of this year where you would be expressing your interest. So we now have these 2 very specific proposals on how to amend this table. Do we have any views on this, or do we agree on doing so? Yeah, so this also includes the co-chairs. So it is so decided, and the Secretariat will be readjusting the table. Just to conclude on this agenda item, so as I just said, Ayman and myself, together with the Secretariat, we will be revisiting the draft agenda later today to adjust it for any purposes for tomorrow, and to make sure that we keep on running things smoothly. Moving on to agenda item 4 on the SCF work plan, introduction to our work plan. I'm handing over to Ayman. Ayman, please.
Thank you very much, Ismo. Turning on to agenda item 4, the 2019 work plan of the SCF. As outlined in the background paper, the CUB in its decision for CB24 endorsed the work plan for the SCF for 2019. The work plan for the SCF for 2019 was considered on the basis of the agreement at the SCF 19th meeting, where the SCF decided on dates for the SCF 20th meeting and tentative dates for SCF 21st meeting. Members may also recall that as per decision 2 CB17 Annex 6, the CUB decided that the CUB would meet at least twice. That would be actually the SCF would meet at least twice a year. Consistent with these arrangements, it is proposed to have 2 meetings of the SCF of this year, this one and the coming one, the 21st meeting. The background paper also contains a proposal allocation of work across the meetings, as well as on the intersessional basis. Unless there are any objections, we would propose to proceed with the work plan as proposed. As the background paper points out, intersessional work will be vital this year, and the proposal is that, in line with the past practices, that this intersessional work will be taken forward by working groups led by 1 or 2 co-facilitators. The background paper also notes possible outreach and communication activities, and it would be our proposal to look into these areas when discussing the respective agenda items. Along these lines, there is also a proposal in line with the past practices to organize a side event, SCF side event, during the SBs, and that will be the SB 50 in June, to provide an update on the implementation of the SCF work plan. Unless there is an objection, the co-chairs, together with the Secretariat, would organize this side event, actively engaging all members and particularly the co-facilitators of the respective working groups. So, in addition, you may want to consider, if members of the SCF are going to be present during SB 50, we may organize an informal meeting of the committee. It's just to take stock of the activities that you've done up until June. It is an informal setting. It's not a decision-making meeting. It's just a taking stock of the work has been done and perhaps give some guidance going forward. So I'd like to propose this to the committee, and I'd like to hear from you now, because this requires some arrangements, logistical arrangements as well. Do you all agree that we would convene an informal SCF meeting during SB 50? Matthias, please.
Thanks. On your particular proposal on an informal meeting, I think I'd be ready to consider that together with colleagues if we would be available. Could I just make some comments also on the proposed work plan and also with the make reference to the annotated agenda which we were given, which makes a few comments also in relation to the work plan. Just initially, I mean, it's very helpful for us, of course, as members to have this very long list, which the Secretariat has compiled for us, which shows the trust which is put in the committee in taking work forward, and not least when it comes to requests from various colleagues in other constituted bodies. One specific point, at a certain point in the work plan, it's made reference to the SCF communication strategy, and I think it would be very helpful if that maybe could be shared also with the committee, so we could have a look at the strategy itself. Then moving on to the annotated agenda for this agenda item, looking at the point. Let's see. So that's point 4E on, there's a point there saying methodologies for reviewing adequacy and effectiveness of adaptation and support. I'd be interested on sort of more background on that particular point. I mean, I appreciate colleagues in other constituted bodies going into this particular matter, but just from my perspective, when I'm reading this, and I was reading it just ahead of the meeting, it seems to me that this sort of the kind of work which is foreseen here in developing methodologies for reviewing adequacy and effectiveness of support is something which sort of sits at the heart of the aid effectiveness agenda. And that should be, I would assume that is taken well into account when other colleagues in other constituted bodies are developing that kind of work, and so sort of not creating new kind of methodologies when it relates to assistance when it comes to climate adaptation. Just my final point on loss and damage, just a question on how co-chairs foresee we should proceed on that work. It seems that we are encouraged to provide input to a technical paper. I was just wondering whether that technical paper will be sent to us as a committee, or if we are expected to start drafting something sort of on our own. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Matthias, for the intervention and for the remarks on the work plan, particularly on the communication strategy is being devised, is being drafted. So once it's ready, it will be communicated to all members. So that should come in some time, perhaps intersessionally. Yeah, so you should expect it to be delivered to you intercessionally. We take note of your further remarks on the adequacy of support, so that is well noted. Peter, please.
Yeah, thank you. And I had similar questions and reading that as Matthias on that point. But one of the other questions, I think what the timeline and proposed approach for the meetings, I think was very helpful. So we have some kind of an idea of where we're phasing certain discussions. But one of the things that I saw, and I know this is coming up, but it's a review of the functions of the SCF, which we'll discuss at the next meeting. Now, just to recap, the last time how this was done is that it actually was a COP decision to review the functions, and then it was given to the SCF to work on that. So I'm not sure. I mean, I always like to be proactive, but I think it would be good to wait for a COP decision before we actually start discussing how to do this as SCF, because I think that really sets, the COP decision gives us the mandate to work on this, and then we can take that up. I mean, we don't have to. We just reviewed the functions. There is no specific timeline, so it will be good up to the COP to decide whether that's actually necessary at this point or whether we can do that at a later point. So that was one of the questions. And one thing that I noticed is that there's no outcome on the needs determination foreseen at this meeting. I'm sure it's an oversight. I'm sure we're going to deliver something on the needs determination. So, but I mean, it's just a minor point. And I think that's that's it for now. Thank you. And I'm available on at the SPs, but just for 1 week, unfortunately, the first week.
Thank you very much, Peter, for the remarks. We have the needs assessment in the work plan, and it's actually in the priority areas. So we have that, Peter, in the plan. Perhaps it's not captured in the program. Please, Peter.
Just to continue, I forgot to mention, I think we have a lot of mandates, as also Matthias pointed out, on this adequacy and effectiveness. And there are many things that I think we should be strategic in trying to find ways or see how we can integrate some of these questions that we have in some of the products that we're actually doing, instead of just taking up additional work and doing new work. I think, for instance, the adequacy and effectiveness might be a possibility, but we need to discuss that to include that in the BA and say something about that, for instance. But I think that's the way that we need to look at these mandates, and I believe that the co-chairs have lunch also with the AC co-chairs today, and I think it would be good to discuss with them. So what is it exactly that they expect from us? How can we deliver on that, and how can we do that in a way that is within our mandate, which is also efficient, without putting enough additional work on the separate work on the SCF, where we have to spend time and working on separate products, but see if we can integrate some of their questions and concerns into existing things that we were doing.
Well, thanks, Peter, for the remarks. Listen, we really want to stick to the mandates, and we really want to build on past experiences and knowledge and, all the data. We have, I think, a wealth of database that we can tap on as we do the exercise. But we really want to, be able to improve our products, our deliverables, which puts a lot of pressure and strain our resources and our ability to be able to deliver in a timely manner all those expected outcomes. But we count on the breakout groups, on the different working streams, with the leadership of the co-facilitators to get us to where we want to be. So let's see how things unfold going forward. But your point is well taken, that we really want to not to reinvent the wheel and build on the database that we have. Thank you very much. Randy?
Yeah, I think just one kind of general comment about the background note on our 2019 work program is I think one of the, was it Annex 2, is the compendium of all the mandates that we've ever received. But then I think Annex 3, which is actually supposed to be our work program, I think that also to me reads too much like just a blind compendium of all mandates that we've ever received or anything that we've ever worked on once at any point in time. So I think that Annex 3 should be revised and streamlined in accordance with the rest of our discussions here at this meeting, because I think in particular, a number of areas it prejudges ongoing work or ongoing work programs or work streams that I'm not sure we are going to be, actively working on this year or next year, because I think there needs to be a distinction between the SCF has a mandate, the standing committee, and we're the standing committee on a number of areas, which means that we always have the ability, if asked, to work on different topics. But that doesn't mean that we're always working on all topics all the time. So, we're not trying, no one's trying to, I think, rewrite the mandate of the SCF, but I do think that our work program someone should be able to pick it up, and it should kind of indicate the strategic direction of the SCF over the next 2 years. And right now, to me, it doesn't exactly do that, but I can make more specific comments when we actually discuss some of the actions included here.
Indeed, well noted. Thank you very much for that, Randy. And definitely, first we need to stick to the mandates as been given to us, and then we'll try to prioritize those mandates because some of them are really time bound. We really want to focus on those time bound mandates and see what we can do. We really, at this point of time, we're not inviting extra activities because we don't have the time and resources for that, but we really want to stick to the mandates. But your point is taken, and we will try to streamline Annex 2 and Annex 3 for the work plan. Any other calls? Dolphin, please. Yeah, Dolphin and then Toro.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. Now, I generally support the work plan. I was going to make a point that is quite similar to Randy's, is that I think we should strive to have a more strategic presentation of the work plan that clearly indicates our priorities. And I think to me, for this year, the priorities are the work on launching the work on the BA, launching the work on the needs determination report, the guidance, which is ongoing, and the forum that we have this year. And I think another point is that on the communication and outreach, I think we should also make apparent in the work plan what it is that we are going to do concretely this year. And I've noted, actually, it was interesting during the strategic retreat yesterday, I noted some comments that we were not maybe exploiting enough the good work that has been done, in particular with regard to the biennial assessment report, that the SCF tends to shift to the next one before doing a full outreach on this one. So practically speaking, I think it could be interesting to also think of how we want to promote the BA further this year, given that there is a full climate agenda. So that could be also put in the work program. And finally, just in terms of the presentation, as it has been noted, there are some points where we don't see an outcome, like for instance, on the BA, for instance, or even the needs. And as Peter noted on the review of the financial mechanism, the time frame is 2021, but I'm not sure that we need to do something this year. So if it's a 2019 work program, maybe it shouldn't appear, or unless we have a multiple year work program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dolphin, for the comments. Indeed, we will focus on the big ticket items, I should say, and see what we can do. And I'm sure we'll find a lot of ways of addressing those very critical items when we go into the breakout groups and we have the co-facilitators put their ingenuity to it and see how we can really deliver on. But your point is well taken, and we need to really be specific on what are these big expectations for 2019 and be clear on that so that we don't get lost on the many items that we're dealing with. Thank you very much for that. Turo, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. And I'd like to support as well the work plan of this year as well as timeline. But I'd like to just one comment on the second SCF meeting in this year. The 21st meeting, we support to examine the topic of the next forum, next year. But I'd like to raise that we have discussed whether we should consider the frequency of the forum up from 2020, and also is supposed to discuss the significance of this forum. And so I think if we consider the topic, I think this theme will be discussed together. I just like to remind the last meeting of the SCF. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's granted. Yes, we can do that. We can share a copy of it. Thank you very much, Tim. Any other calls? Mohammed, please.
Thank you so much, Ayman. I think Annex 3 gives us a clear idea when are the deliverables expected and what kind of work is being done. And I don't see this overload that colleagues have been putting forward or saying or pointing to. This is the first meeting of this year. We haven't even had the breakout groups. We haven't even decided on how we're going to take things forward. So why are we prejudging things and saying that this is too much, we cannot do that? Let's do it, and let's see by the second or by the first informal meeting that we'll have by the SBs, what is the progress that is being done before prejudging things, especially that I'm hearing like conflicting messages. On one side, Delphine is saying we have to have more outreach, we have a lot of products to outreach. On the other side, we're saying we shouldn't be having a forum, we shouldn't be doing this, we should revisit all the activities of this committee. So we are not saying the same message here. I think it's very clear, at least from the developing countries' point of view, that this is an important body under the convention and is serving everybody. It is providing a lot of outputs, and it is engaging with the different constituted bodies. It is having tasks, and there is a lot of confidence in it from the different parties across the board. This is a full thing. We have delivered before. We have always been delivering. I have never seen this body not delivering. We have delivered on the guidance. We have delivered on the reports, the BA. We have delivered on too many things. And we have additional elements. I don't see why we are questioning them now. Let's start working by mid-year or maybe by the second formal meeting. Then we will be deciding on how things are moving, especially that some of those reports, that the huge reports, are not expected to be at the end of this year. But recommendations are expected to be coming at the end of this year, be it guidance to the operating entities or other recommendations, which is not that difficult, by the way. So please don't overload things. This is the first agenda item, I would say. We haven't even went beyond that. And we are trying to overload things. And I got the sense even yesterday that there was an idea that this is too much work, we cannot do it. No, we can do it. Some of the challenges that I pointed to is the linkage with the other constituted bodies, which needs more people to engage on. But if we start from the beginning today saying that we have to revisit the forum, at the same time we're saying we have to have an outreach policy. I mean, like, you're saying two conflicting messages. So let's have this, let's start our work, let's start working, see the breakout groups, what will be coming out, give the mandates, start working on things, and then let's decide later on do we have a lot of work or not. And if colleagues see this is a much more work, I'm hearing this from colleagues who can bring more and more experts from their countries who can support them, who can support the work of the SCF. I think the work of the SCF has been doing well, building on the members, building on the stakeholders engagement, building on extra experts coming from outside. So please, let's start working. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you very much, Mohammed. I guess, yeah, your points are well taken. We're going to tackle these issues, make no mistake, and we will do them. this, their mandates, then their mandates, but it's just a matter of perhaps trying to see what, how can we best approach those mandates and try to do them with the, with the limited resources we have, and including time. But we'll definitely deliver on them, and we're ready. We have been, challenged in the past, and we delivered. So we will do it this year for those deliverables that are expected this year. But just to perhaps put something on the table for you, you may want to consider retiring the biennial assessment. That will give you a big slack, I guess, in terms of resources and efforts, that we stop doing the biennial assessment for this coming cycle and see what would be the reactions of your stakeholders. So this is something for you to consider. Maybe you don't want to do the biennial assessment, and we can go back to the conference with the parties to tell them as to why we think it's, because now we have 9.5, we have 9.7. We have other means of assessing the flow of climate finance. So perhaps it would be, it's an obsolete exercise perhaps to do the biennial assessment. But let me go to Zahir and I'll come back to you. Zahir, please.
Thank you very much, Imran. I won't comment on what you said there. I'm just basing on the reflection we had yesterday on the retreat and the discussion we had. Unfortunately, not everybody was there. It was just a smaller group of people to allow us to have that discussion. But when you look at it, I don't want to comment on the products and the mandate and things like that, but I'm trying to get to the sense of what is the role that we play as an SCF then? And why do you have an SCF? Is it merely just to fulfill mandates and develop products, and so we've done it and things? Because I look at this year. This year is a very important year. If you look at this year, you have the GCF doing its replenishment, which is an operating entity of the financial mechanism, which is one of the core things of the SCF's responsibility. You have the Secretary General having a summit in September, where you're looking at, pledging happening, and part of the pledging will be about ambition and finance, etc. So you have a number of things going on this year. But if I look at our work plan and look at our products, and I begin to ask the question whether what we are doing will in any way have any influence on any of these things, and the products that we are producing would come at a point in time when they really don't have any. So if we're going to produce the stuff on needs, yes, okay, fine, we have a mandate to do it next year. It's after the operating entities have done their replenishments, etc. So yeah, it's good to have a report, but does it influence anything? Nothing. So it's also, we don't work in a vacuum, and I'm just beginning to wonder whether we as an SCF are just going through the motions of doing things that we are mandated to do, and it's fine that we can do that. That's the task. But at the end of the day, you need to go to the heart of what the SCF was created for. And if you look at those things about the mobilization, about the financial mechanisms, etc., you're having all these activities taking place, and we as an SCF are not really directly informing, influencing, or whatsoever in any of these processes. I'll just aside. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Zahir, for the comments. Indeed, this is going to be a critical year. You all need not to forget, please. I draw your attention to next year is going to be a critical year. Why? It's a Paris Agreement. Next year, there is a call for updating NDCs. If you go to paragraph, I think, 23, 24 of CB21, where there is a call for updating the NDCs. So you need to be mindful of that parties perhaps need to be better informed on finance, the provision of support, and what have you, for them to do a meaningful update to their NDCs should they elect to do so. So this is going to be a critical year next year for the conference of the parties in terms of the nationally determined contributions update, because there is an update that is going to take place, and maybe the SCF will be in a position to perhaps help out in sort of making clear on the expected, the potential, the kind of provision of support that will be available for developing countries, perhaps to do more to increase their ambitions, to be perhaps, be more open to different climate actions, be it mitigation or adaptation. But please keep this in mind that next year is going to be a critical year. Gabi, please. Ivan, you first, and then Gabi, please.
Yeah, thank you. It's going to be very short. Actually, now I understand Gabriela's confusion because I was looking in Annex 2, a reference to Decision 7 CP 19, paragraph 11, which is the mandate on forests, and it's not there. So it's important to understand that the mandate wasn't time-bound, wasn't just to organize a forum, which is what has been done. It's an ongoing mandate, and I think we have to make it explicit in future documents because, as you said, it's going to become even more important in light of the Paris Agreement, especially because of Articles 5 and 6. So it's important to maintain the mandates that we have been given unless they are retired. And I don't think this mandate has been retired yet. Thank you.
Indeed, very well noted. Thank you very much for that, Ivan. I have next Vicky and then Gabi. Vicky, please.
Thank you. And it's actually good that I would come after Ivan because I have the same comment. Looking at both Annex 2 and Annex 3, I think, yes, it gives a very complete, it gives an almost complete view of what has been assigned to the SCF, but in my eyes, it's not always as complete. For instance, on the adaptation, additional mandates adaptation, there is a reference to Decision 11 CMA 1, paragraph 34. It has to be paragraph 34 and 35. So it is a bit of, we have to be very careful that we stick to the mandates and that we make sure that we work in the right context of issues. The same on the additional mandates and needs. It's not needs, it's a needs determination report. Those things are just to avoid confusion that we know that what we are talking about. So I think even this is a very clear outline of everything. It still has some caveats, which makes it uncomfortable, I guess, for all of us to agree to it as such. That's why I do like Annex 1, which gives a much more clear outline of what we can do. But I'm very happy to go through those issues and see what do we all have the same understanding, what do we consider to be the mandate, and so on. But maybe that's not for now. You also, Ayman, you had two concrete proposals for the SB 50 on a side event and a stock taking meeting. I think both are very good ideas, and I would very much support those. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the support, Vicky, and those proposals. Appreciate it, and your points are taken. We will adhere to the mandate and even to the exact words used in the mandate. So if we were talking about the determination of needs, is it the same thing as the assessment of needs? Or we're talking about determination of needs. So we really have to, be very careful on the exact wording of the mandate so that we're all on the same page, not to confuse ourselves. Yeah, we really want to, even in our jargon, we use the same language that was used in the decision itself. Thank you very much, Vicky, for that. We'll go to Gabi and then Paul. Gabi.
Thank you. I was actually trying not to intervene on this one, but then you kind of triggered a reaction. I'm sorry. First of all, we all just agreed before on your two priorities for this year, and I think the work plan should reflect that. Now, I don't have a problem if you list all the mandates that have ever been given to the SCF. My understanding was that that's Annex 2. And then Annex 3 would reflect the two-pager we have already approved before, earlier in the meeting. So I think that's how you should approach the whole thing. Fully agree with Vicky that then Annex 2 should really reflect the mandates as they were given in their entirety. And then just a quick response to what was said by Zahir, and then also what was said by you. With regards to Zahir's intervention, fully agree with him that we look at what you had on your two-pager and identify how these products can be made meaningful to as big of an audience as possible. We also have to keep ourselves in mind that we do serve the Convention and the Paris Agreement. And for example, getting rid of the biennial assessment, it's already on your priority list. If you want to remove it, we can have a conversation about that. I don't think the COP would be very happy about that. It was reflected, and the CMA, it was reflected in multiple decisions in Katowice related to the global stocktake and such. So I don't think we can get rid of that at this point in time. But just, to keep that in mind, we're also serving the convention and the agreement itself.
By all means, thank you very much, Gabby. And indeed, we try to, as much as possible, streamline the work plan. But I guess what you see here in Annex 2 and Annex 3, it gives you the size and magnitude of what is expected from us. But putting it in the right order and delivering it in a timely manner is just something that we should exercise. My fellow co-chair and I try to, take you through the work plan to at least deliver on what is expected for 2019. The issue of the biennial assessment, I just thought might be an idea for you to consider, because we are the COP. We are the COP, and we can go back to the conference of the parties, telling them that your finance experts are suggesting to you that we would just retire this item given the outcome of COP24, and that we have enough other mandates that will cover the intent of gauging the finance flow. If there is something acceptable, it's fine. If not, then it's fine. But I leave this for you to think about. Because really, if you talk about the global stocktake, and the global stocktake would expect something different than what we are reporting in the biennial assessment. So just really want to make sure that we are really investing the best time and effort in something that really makes an impact. And you need to ask yourselves, given the current world that we have, after Katowice, after COP24, when we agreed on the MPGs, the modalities, procedures, and guidelines of operationalizing Paris Agreement, do you see, as a committee, there is still value in the biennial assessment that justifies the effort and time that we spend? You need to really think about that. I'm not inviting any kind of reactions. I just want you to think about it, and perhaps we could, come back to it. Paul, and then Saini. Paul, please.
I think we should be more proactive, following up with what our co-chair just said, because if we talk about the COPE, let's look at what the COPE is. It meets once a year, and it's not the COPE that's going to consider this in first version. It's a working group of the COPE, and many of the people in that working group in the COPE that day when it convenes are the very same people who are sitting here, but with different hats on, to be sure. But so if we want something from the COPE, I think we should submit it to the COPE. Because if we're waiting for the guidance of the COPE, we could wait forever, because the COPE isn't proactive. So I think that we need to be proactive. What the COPE does comes from somewhere else. Comes from the SBI, comes from SABSTA, comes from us, comes from the Green Climate Fund. So I think that we should set our agenda, and when we wanted something from the COPE, we should send it to the COPE and get that level of approval. But the initiation of it, the initiative and the formulation of it should be from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. And indeed, we need to be proactive, and we are the advisory body of the COP. So we would advise the COP on however we think, to take forward the work of the climate finance. But thank you very much for reminding us that we really need to be more proactive. Saini, please.
Yes, good morning, Chair and colleagues. I actually thought when you were making your first comments on the BA, I actually thought that you were joking. But now that you're saying it again and again, I'm actually thinking that no, you're not joking. You're actually serious about us thinking about retiring the BA. And I think that would be an horrible mistake for a number of reasons. The first one is, the way the BA is structured is that it's like an encyclopedia on climate finance. We're trying to deal with all the challenges and limitations which we know, whether they're methodological issues. So there's no way, you can be talking about MRV of support, aggregate MRV of support, and not seeing merit in the BA tracking what's there when it comes to methodological aspects of that MRV. So when you're talking about, for instance, needs, well, where do you go and find the information? Right now you can check your NDCs, you can check NAPs for countries who have NAPs, you can check the biannual update reports, which the BA tries to aggregate once again. The famous 2.1C, BA started initiating work on 2.1C before COP24. Same thing on needs, assessment of climate finance and everything. What we haven't done, and I would agree with Zahir on that, we've not then unpacked the results or the outcome or whatever information which was in the BA, and we've not unpacked it and then package it for different audience and try now in a real communication strategy to enhance the visibility of the committee. Unfortunately, most don't read what we produce and get, and we're happy because we present it at COP and then we're done with the work. But I would again agree with Zahir that there is a lot of opportunity, and we do have substantive inputs into the ongoing work. I know that the work on the determination of needs will not be ready for for at least this year's replenishment of the GCF, but we have plenty. If there is an interest of the SCF providing input to that, we have plenty of information and plenty of technical inputs if the committee so desires for us to be part of that process, or at least to send input to those who are part of that process. So again, we just need to agree on our communication strategy, and then we'll delve into the wealth of information we've been producing for the last 8 years, repackaging it and make it relevant, and in the same time enhance our visibility and relevancy to the full process. And again, I think the BA, you go and find a lot of good information in the BA to do that. Said Al Rais, shukran.
Well, thank you very much, Seni. I know the BA is dear to our hearts. It's been our, flagship deliverable. But all I'm saying, I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying, think about it. Is it time to reconsider or not? I'm just saying, we all at some point of time, we have to retire, So this is an agenda item that perhaps need to be retired given the circumstances, given the expectation, given the evolution of the elements. And Saini, let's not forget, the original intent of the biennial assessment is to measure climate finance against the $100 billion. Not the flow of the entire finance moving on all different directions. But now, we lost that. It has become just a measure of everything that's happening. I don't want to continue this discussion about the BA. I thought I might just give you a teaser this morning to think about, retiring, because we are looking forward to retire ourselves, but it's something to think about. Because seriously, the biennial assessment is taking a lot of effort, a lot of work. So just from a cost perspective, cost benefit analysis, would you think that still we need to do it, or we can at least, have a different plan? I'll leave that there and I'll take Mo and then Evan, please.
Thank you, Ayman. Can we go to the agenda? Because what happened now is this discussion was supposed to be okay. I think the discussion that we're having now was supposed to be within the brainstorming session that we had yesterday in the retreat. And but what happened this morning, and that's why I made my previous intervention, is that I got the sense that some colleagues in the group see that there's a lot of work in the SCF, let's reduce it. And I said yesterday that once you go in this direction, then each and everyone will pick an issue that he wants to reduce, and we will just be locked in what we are having now. And with new innovative ideas, and one supporting or defending a product, another one saying, I want this agenda item. What we have mandates that we all, it was the same people around the table negotiating the same thing. So please, let's not say that what we agreed to like a couple of months ago, all of us, we cannot fulfill now, because you should have said that in the COP. So if we have the mandates, then we have the mandates. Let's fulfill them, whatever they are. And if we are not able to fulfill all of them, then we need to report to the COP and say we could do this, we couldn't do that. But let's not have this kind of a process where we start screening and trying to filter, putting filters ourselves. Each one of us is trying to pick and choose what he likes, what he does not like, and say let's park this, let's do that, let's do that. We have an agenda in front of us. Let's work on it. We have products, we have mandates. Let's fulfill them. This is my bottom line. That's why I came here. I didn't come here to have this strange discussion of, well, this is not nice. Well, I don't like this one. Let's part of those mandates. Let's have this. Let's have that. I mean, it's already 11 o'clock and we haven't engaged in any of the substance that we have. We were complaining that we don't have enough time. The fact is, we have mandates that we are not going to run from. We all agree to. Same people sitting around this table agree to those mandates. We have products that we have to fulfill, all of them. And if we are not able to fulfill some, then we have to report to the COP why we couldn't do that. But in this process, we should not pick and choose, because if we open the Pandora's box, I mean, a lot of things will be coming out and a lot of ideas will be floating around. Some things that some of us, one of us, two of us constituency doesn't like, then we start we will go in a different route that I think we shouldn't be engaging on. This is the first meeting. Let's start working, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. Yes, we are accountable to the CUB and we will report to the CUB. If we delivered or we did not, we have to have an explanation. I'll have Evan, Sergey, and then Paul. Evan, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Just very quick. I think that maybe we shouldn't be using the word retiring, because it's not because the BA isn't useful anymore. It's because it needs to evolve in order to better serve the Paris Agreement. And maybe we should think about the ways it could evolve in order to, for example, give more information, more detailed information regarding adaptation, which currently doesn't provide. So just to say that. Thank you.
Well noted. Thank you very much for that. We look forward to ideas, please. So let's just see how we can improve it. Sergey, please.
Thank you very much. I cannot not to agree with Mohammed. Of course, if a mandate is given, this mandate should be fulfilled completely. But I think here it's a sort of slight misunderstanding, because nobody is against to fulfill all mandates. I think what is really important to understand what should be done specifically this year in 2019. Wording is crucially important. We have to check once again this wording, especially not for all of us. English is the native language for us to understand what exactly the nuances here, the details. And in this case, it will be easier for us to understand what are the real flagships, the real priorities. Nobody were against to fulfill mandates. I think it's a misunderstanding, my vision. And in principle, the plan is, well, the plan is in conformity with the mandates we received from COP and should be fulfilled. Thank you.
Very well noted. Yes, thank you very much for that, Sergey. And listen, by the way, this year you're going to work intersessionally. We'll have much more activity intersessionally. So even we will count for the time we lose here in the formal session for you to do some work intersessionally. So we will see in the organization of work, when we see the the work streams, we'll ask the co-facilitators to really have a plan to work intersessionally through conference calls and what have you to advance our work. Paul?
Well, if we're going to talk at the existential level, this committee was formed because climate finance was seen as a big problem. And today it's still a big problem. And this committee can cease to exist when there is sufficient, accessible, predictable climate finance for mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damages. We're a long ways from that. And the things we're talking about are tools. They're tools to try to get there, to try to solve the problems that impede getting to the goal of sufficient, accessible, and predictable climate finance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that. Indeed, and as I said, please think of next year to be a special year. The world is watching. Parties are expected to raise their ambitions in the revision of their indices, and there cannot be done, or this would not be able to happen or would not be achievable if we don't provide clarity, better understanding of the flows of climate finance. So keep this in mind as we really go into next year. If there are no further calls on the floor, I want to give the floor to my fellow co-chair to comment on forests. But before I do that, let me just congratulate the Green Climate Fund for approving the first results-based payment for forests in the amount of $96 million. That was a turning point in the funding proposals by the Green Climate Fund. It was historic to see that project approved, which sets a new direction for RED Plus activities. So I just wanted to mention that. Ismo, please.
Thanks, Ayman, for giving floor to me as well. Yeah, just very briefly, 2 points. One is just to remind ourselves that we did agree at the beginning of this meeting our areas of priorities for this year's work plan. And as we were discussing yesterday, we have those 4 key products that should deserve our focus this year. So this was approved, that 2-pager on the priorities, and we should really take it from there. On the forest specifically, if I just may say something on that, we have been discussing this time and time over again in this committee and also in the COPPER, and a lot has been already done on the matter. We organized the Durban Forum a few years ago, and there has been input from the SCF on this topic. And specifically in Marrakesh, in COP22, we agreed in HCP 22 that forest matters would be integrated to the work plan where appropriate. I remember it because I was negotiating that on behalf of the EU. So what does this mean? It means that we are not doing everything at the same time. And I think the notion of integration forest where appropriate was precisely meant to mean that we had already addressed that issue. It might be somewhere as part of our open-ended mandates, as it was noted, but it doesn't mean necessarily that it should be our priority for our annual work plan. And this is now what we have accepted for this year, that our work plan would focus on the key deliverables of this year. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Ismo. With that, before I move on, do I take it that there is no objection to the side event and the informal meeting in SB 50? Is there any objection for those 2 activities? A side event for the SCF and an informal meeting of the committee at the SCF 50, at the SB 50?
When you say an informal meeting, do you have an idea if it's a day or an hour or 2 days? I mean,
the SCF?
Yeah, the informal meeting
10
you're
minutes.
talking about. Oh, okay. Well,
It could be, yeah.
Okay.
It just really, just getting together as a committee, and hopefully we will have, just a good quorum where we just take stock of where we stand on the different mandates and the different activities intersessionally, because we really, seriously, we would expect you to be very active intersessionally, and then we would come to SB 50 in June to hear from you. What have you done between sort of this meeting and June, because we really want to be more active this year. So is there any objection? Hearing none. Thank you very much. Wow, that was long. Sorry. So it was light. Didn't mean, I take it back. Moving on. We're not done yet. Just want to go over a couple of important items here. So in consideration of the 2019 work plan of the SCF, the background paper outlines the various mandates the SCF has received, particularly during COP24. Many of the mandates will be addressed when the SCF takes up the various agenda items during this meeting. The mandates to be addressed under the various agenda items are summarized as follows. Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement, the first report of the determination of needs of developing countries related to implementation of the Convention and the Paris Agreement, and any outreach or communication activities related to these two mandates. Other mandates that may be considered in the context of 2019 work plan include support to enhance the capacity of developing countries in preparing, communicating, and accounting for their nationally determined contributions, inputs to the global stocktake, timing of the second review of the SCF, gender-related mandates, any additional outreach or communication activities. Furthermore, COP24 requested the SCF to consider, in line with its mandate and in collaboration with the TEC and PCCB, the Paris Committee for Capacity Building, taking into account the recommendations of the AC and LEG, as well as the relevant submissions from Paris and the observer organizations, ways to facilitate the mobilization of support for adaptation in developing countries in the context of the limit to increase the global average temperature referred to in Article 2 of the Paris Agreement. COP24 also requested the SCF to include recommendations on this consideration in its annual report. At its last session, the COP also invited the AC and the LEG in collaboration with the SCF and relevant experts to contribute to the technical work on developing methodologies for reviewing the adequacy and effectiveness of adaptation and support by continuing to compile existing methodologies for reviewing the adequacy and effectiveness of support. Moving on to gender, going back to the gender-related mandates just mentioned, one specific area of work outlined in this year was the organization of a possible technical segment strategy meeting or webinar. In this regard, we would like to invite the Secretariat to make a brief intervention on facilitating a possible webinar this year. Please.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. I'm just going to briefly, because we have new members, I'm just going to go over briefly the mandate that we're referring to this morning, and that's in Decision 21 CP22. The COP requested all UNFCCC constituted bodies to include in their regular reports information on progress made towards integrating a gender perspective in their processes, taking into account the entry points identified in a technical paper that was prepared by the Secretariat. And then in Decision 3 CP23, under Priority Area C on coherence of the Gender Action Plan that was established under that decision, the COP requested the Secretariat Gender Team, in collaboration with United Nations entities and other relevant stakeholders and organisations, to provide capacity building to chairs and members of UNFCCC constituted bodies and technical teams of the Secretariat on how to integrate gender consideration in their respective areas of work and on meeting the goal of gender balance. And this was in support of the original request under the Lima Work Programme on gender. There is a separate request from the COP under Priority Area D of the Gender Action Plan, which relates to the priority area is on gender responsive implementation and means of implementation. And there's a specific request in there to the SCF to host a dialogue on the implementation of its commitment to integrate gender considerations into its work, emphasising the relevance of gender responsive access to finance in the implementation of climate action. However, what I'm presenting this morning only relates to the capacity building request under the coherence priority area, and that's up on the slide. So what is being offered is tailored capacity building to all constituted bodies by the Secretariat, working in collaboration with relevant UN and other organisations. Different modes of delivery of these sessions is possible, including in-person or remotely through webinars, and that's to be guided by the preferences and availabilities of chairs and members of each constituted body. In addition, as different bodies have different historical engagement with or integration of gender perspectives or considerations in their respective areas of work, the sessions will be tailored taking this into account. And the sessions will also seek to be as practical and relevant to the work of each body as possible. So in that regard, possible option for the Standing Committee on Finance would be, given the discussions this morning on your workload and the availability of time during meetings, would be to offer a webinar-based format, a structured discussion with SCF members and selected experts via a recorded webinar, so that if there are members who are unable to attend at the time that the webinar is hosted live, then that it would be available to SCF members to access afterwards. It would be open to SCF members and would be around 1.5 hours in length. In terms of topics, as I say, it is intended that this capacity building be tailored to support the work of the SCF. And so it could include things like new research and ideas for different data sources. And an example of that might be the supporting the recommendation in 2018 biennial assessment and overview of climate finance flows, in which it was encourages climate finance providers to improve tracking and reporting on gender-related aspects of climate finance. Also, we are aware that there is research that's being undertaken in the context of the Gender Action Plan by a number of observer organisations on things like enabling environments and effective pathways for engagement of women's groups and national gender ministries or other gender machineries. Or it could be another topic that is relevant to integrating gender perspectives or considerations in the SCF's work. That would involve potentially 2 to 3 experts, and in relation to the topics I've just mentioned, that could include the OECD, discussing the OECD DAC gender marker that addresses bilateral funding support, looking at the gender aspect in addressing climate change. There is the SCF Observer Organisation, REDU, who a member was identified themselves earlier this morning. They've been participating in this research, and so they could be an expert that would be available, and potentially one of the operating entities to discuss perhaps their work on direct access. But that would depend on whether or not that was the topic that the SCF chose. It could then be moderated by a chair or a member of SCF. The Secretariat could support through questions prepared ahead of time in consultation with the SCF and the experts. And then if that was a concept that's acceptable, then we would work with the chairs to develop that and work out a time that would be appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Laura. I think it's an excellent idea to have this webinar that would really inform participants, all stakeholders on the issue of gender in the context of climate finance and the access to climate finance. So before I will open the floor for reflections, but I really want to take your word on your support for the webinar. Is there any objection by the committee for convening this webinar this year? There is no objection, so can we gavel on that in very slow motion without making much noise? Thank you very much. So we're going to do that. We're going to have a webinar. Perhaps we'll have a good planning for it. We'll have an outline, and we just share that with all members. And we do encourage all committee members to engage in the webinar. We really would want to count on all expertise and knowledge of all different stakeholders. So Let me open now the floor for reflections on what you heard. Anybody wishes to comment? Gender and climate finance, or climate finance and gender? Which one comes first? Gender or climate finance? Gabby, you tell us, please.
Personal unity, in my case, at least. No, great that we approved the webinar. I just have one question, or maybe an input, whether you will look at the constituted bodies that deal with climate finance, well, the SCF, but then also maybe the funds and the boards of the funds, and how many females are represented in that, and then maybe make one slide of that and show the trend, whether we have more or less women represented in those bodies, because I think that's also, with regards to a reflection then back to the COP, I think that's important that parties are aware whether they are nominating women into these bodies or not. I mean, looking around the table, unfortunately Diane is not here, but yeah, we're far from having equal representation of women and men around the table.
Yeah, thank you for that, Gabriel. You want to comment, please, floor.
So we do actually prepare a report every year on the gender composition of all of the constituted bodies, not of the operating entities themselves, but of the boards, and that's available every year. And we do make that also available now in the notice that we send to regional groups when nominating. So we are looking for different ways in which we can communicate that around gender balance, certainly as one aspect of the gender question.
Thank you very much for that. Sergey, please.
I have only one question. It's great that we may look into the balance of male and female in different bodies of the climate or UN climate agenda. And do we have any information about what is happening on the national level in countries? Because, well, my perception is that the balance in the UN bodies are directly connected with what is happening on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. Flora, please.
We also report on the gender balance of delegations to the UNFCCC process, so not at a national level per se, but as reflected in this process. And clearly there is going to be a connection between what happens at a national level and who is nominated at the UNFCCC level. And there has been some work and attention under the Gender Action Plan in relation to that as well.
Thank you very much for that. Peter, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you also for this opportunity. I think it's a very good opportunity, and I fully support having this webinar. And your question was like, is there gender, climate first? I think what research or what it shows that if you take gender considerations into account, you have more effective outcomes. And I think that is very important also when we talk about adequacy and effectiveness of climate finance. So what does that mean, and how do countries actually deal with these kinds of issues? So that, yeah, I think it's very good to have this, but also look more, probably use this webinar also as a start for our own thinking on where can we further integrate gender considerations. We have gender in our BA, but I think it's at a very nascent stage, and I think there are further opportunities. We now have on the forum, one of the cross-cutting teams, also gender. I think it's a good start, but there might be other opportunities as well, and it would be good to explore that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the proposal. Yep, it's taken account of. Well, a clarification for me, Flor. When we talk about gender and climate finance, we really mean, helping out household kind of lifestyle that is influenced greatly by gender, by women, by children, lifestyles of in some parts of the world where contribution to emission reductions, to adaptation is heavily relied on gender, on households and lifestyles. We're in part of the webinar is that we would want to see how we can make an impact as to certain parts of the world where people still use biomass, for example, for cooking, for sort of other activities. And I think these kind of activities can be all seized and stopped by contributing to the provision of modern lifestyle equipment, modern lifestyle kind of items that would minimize the use of heavy polluting kind of means to household activities. So is this something that you would think about and you would find ways and means for solutions? Please.
Certainly, it's certainly one of the areas and has been the subject of certainly the subject of many GEF-funded projects in the past. It is one aspect, and it's certainly something that we can build into the discussion. But going back to the point about whether it's gender and climate, that gender actually has an impact, whether you're looking at the household level or looking at a sort of a macro level around transport or around in things like who's using transport and public transport and the decisions that are being made. So yes, definitely it's at the household level, but it is also more broadly at the economy-wide level.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you for your presentation. And, we look forward to the webinar. Any timeline for it? Do we have any consideration? When would we expect the webinar? We'll have to discuss that. So we'll come back to you as a committee on the timeline for the webinar and the outline of it so that perhaps we can get your views on that. Anybody else is asking for the floor? Well, with this, that concludes our discussion on the work plan. And unless there is an objection, we would propose to proceed with the work plan as outlined in the background paper SCF/2019/20/3. And if there is no objection, then we move on that basis. Randy?
I mean, I'm confused. We just had like 30 to 45 minutes of comments on how the work program needs to be changed. So I don't think we are ready to take a decision to approve the work program, the work plan as the original document existed in the background note. Right? Am I the only one with that impression?
Evan, please.
Yeah, I was in the understanding that we were given recommendations on this informal document, but that doesn't mean that particularly I didn't approve the work program. Maybe Randy has a different view.
Well, thank you very much for that. Let me just invite the observers to comment on the work plan, and then we will suggest a way forward. So our dear observers, you are on the line. Does anybody wish to comment on the work plan at this point of time? The floor is open to you. Any calls for the floor? Well, we'll give you more time. Let me seek the views of our observers physically here in the room. Anybody wishes to take the floor to comment on the work plan from our dear observers in the room? I see too many flags going up. Well, we can't take everybody, so do you want to really prioritize who wants to speak first? Those online, you also have the floor. Anybody's online? Well, why don't we then take a break and then we come back to you. But for now, let me, we really have to conclude this item on the work plan. So what we will do, we will reflect some of the comments that we received. And we'll come back to you with a new version of the work plan. this afternoon, maybe? Yeah, we can do that. This afternoon, we'll come back to you with a new version of the work plan, but we really have to conclude it today so that we are clear on what we're going to do this year and next year. With that, Randy, you want coffee, tea?
Yeah, no, sorry, just go ahead.
So, thank you very much. We'll take a break now for 15 minutes. 15 minutes. So please, we'll come back here at 11:45, please. So enjoy your break. Thank you very much.
It was really long because I went to
check.
Colleagues, please could you take your seats? We need to continue. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 7 on the linkages with the SPI and the thematic bodies of the convention. This is an established practice we have at the SCF that the focal points that we have appointed as our representatives to other bodies give us an update of the latest developments since the last SCF meetings. So I would like to give floor to our two focal points, to Matthias and Randy, to shortly report us on agriculture and loss and damage respectively, and then afterwards invite the observers to make any comments they might wish to do. So Matthias first, floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Co-Chair. And just briefly, I'd be happy to report on the presentation I was privileged to make to the Cornivia workshop in Katowice. Just briefly outlining the work of the committee and providing insights into the kind of products which we deliver. I've personally found it very useful to be able to do that presentation in line sort of with the kind of outreach which we've discussed both today and yesterday. And highlighting the usefulness of the products which the committee produces on a regular basis. So I found there were a couple of questions directed to me after the presentation, and the impression I got was that the presentation was met by appreciation by the workshop members. There were obviously also other presentations done by other constituted bodies. So I think this will be maybe a recurring event also coming up later at other COPs as well. Thank you.
Thank you for being very brief. And Randy?
Thanks, Ismo. So just to, especially because we have some new members, just to provide a brief bit of background, the COP in one of its decisions had decided to task the Secretariat, so it's actually the Secretariat to the XCOM, to put together a paper that outlines the sources of financing that are relevant to assisting countries with loss and damage, both under and outside of the convention. So the actual management of that, the actual paper is being produced by the Secretariat, and it's actually the XCOM who's decided on the outline and all that kind of operational aspects of that. But they have explicitly asked the SCF to provide some written input to that. We've already provided some kind of preliminary input drawing on the very, I think, early data that we've had from when we looked at finance for loss and damage in the previous two BAs, but it wasn't much, and they've asked us for if there's anything more that we can provide. So Paul and I are currently in the process of drafting up some further written input that hopefully we can circulate later tonight for the committee to consider sending over to the XCOM for the purpose of informing the paper that the Secretariat's providing. Preparing.
Thank you. Any comments from the members? Paul, please.
And then, as I mentioned earlier, there's the proposal that I attend the XCOM meeting at the beginning of April to be able to discuss it with them.
Thank you. Anybody else? No. Would any of our observers present would like to make any comment? Floor is yours. Again, too many flags waving. How about our observers, virtual participants? Any comments from your side? None? Okay, thank you. I would also like to inform the SCF members that Ayman and myself are going to have a lunch in 1 hour's time, hopefully, with the co-chairs of the adaptation committee. No, sorry, Peter, you want to come in?
Yeah, I was just wondering whether we are going to do a round of all the liaisons, because as Mo and I are focal points for the on adaptation, and we've provided input on the TAP A program, highlighting what kind of work we've already done as the SCF and what could contribute to their discussions, because the main focus of the TAP A this year is on adaptation finance. But I think, well, you were starting your sentence. It's good to have a more thorough discussion, especially with the adaptation committee on how to relate to them, because they have a lot of questions on finance, and I think it would be good as SCF to be engaged in that work, but and to have also discussions here on how to best do that, how to represent the SCF views in their work, or how to contribute with our work to what they are, what they're requesting from us. But yeah, I think the lunch is a good opportunity to discuss it with them.
Okay, thank you. So, okay, so I take it that we're going to have this lunch with the adaptation committee co-chairs, and if there's anything particular that comes, we would be reporting back to you. And in what comes to this representation of the SCF in the other bodies, as we discussed before the coffee break, the Secretariat will be preparing a new version of the list where you can still be signing up to the close of business today to express your interest in working, in being our focal points in different areas. I don't see any other request for floor, so in the interest of time, I want to move ahead and close this agenda item and hand over to Ayman, who will briefly go through the 2019 Forum State of Play.
Thank you very much. It's more appreciated. As you may recall, at the SCF 19, the discussion were initiated on the 2019 forum. We would like to thank Mr. Mohammed Nasr and Peter Terbesta for their continuous engagement on this issue over the past months. Following the end of the SCF 19, the committee requested the co-facilitators to develop the draft program of the 2019 forum on the topic of climate finance and sustainable cities. Based on the co-facilitators' proposals, by integrating the 4 sub-themes that were agreed by the SCF, these 4 sub-themes were: 1, financing cities' low-emission development; 2, financing climate-resilient cities; 3, capacity building of local authorities to finance sustainable cities; and lastly, the role of climate finance in facilitating a transition towards inclusive, participatory, and gender-responsive and youth-oriented cities. During this meeting, the SCF needs to agree on 2 important components of the forum. A draft of the forum program was prepared by the co-facilitators and can be found in Annex 1 of the SCF background paper on the forum. 2, the dates and venue of the forum based on the list of partners events prepared by the co-facilitators contained in Annex 2 of the background paper. We would like to invite the co-facilitators of this item to provide further updates to the committee related to the upcoming forum. I'd like to give you the floor now, Peter and Mo, to share with you your updates, please, so far. Peter? Is Mo around? Yeah.
Well, asked me to present, so I hope it's okay if I go ahead. Although he's
Yeah,
out of the room. But yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, as you said, we've come a long way. We already had the 4 sub-themes identified, and the objective of the forum will only be to enhance the understanding on how to accelerate the mobilization and delivery of climate finance for sustainable cities. And the objective really of the forum is to bring together key stakeholders and sharing good practices and lessons learned in financing sustainable cities, identifying challenges faced by actors in the city level to access climate finance and sharing information on the available support, and exploring the role of climate finance to facilitate inclusive, participatory, gender-responsive and youth-oriented cities. And just to give you a quick rundown of the program that we envisage. We have the idea is to have a two-day forum, and on day 1 we'll have in the morning an overarching discussions on the issues that cities face, with particular relating to achievement of the Paris Agreement, SDGs, and other city-related UN goals and commitments, such as the new urban agenda, the UN Habitat 3, and Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. And then the aim of the morning session is to see how climate finance can play a role in helping cities resolve these issues that are faced with and meet these goals, and this will help set up the scene also for day 2 for the whole forum. And the afternoon will focus on the best practices and lessons learned from utilizing climate finance for sustainable cities, and it will look into sources of climate finance for cities, on the innovative mechanisms and instruments that cities could utilize, and the city's experience in identifying their investments and needs and investment priorities. And on day 2, the forum will focus on ways to bolster the capacity of cities to access climate finance. And in the submission received by the SCF, which we called for when we were thinking about the forum, the capacity gap has been highlighted as the most pressing concern. And the morning session of day 2 will look into how cities can be supported to access finance they require, the tools available to help them design climate projects that can attract financial resources. And in the afternoon of day 2, the forum will look into how climate finance can build more inclusive, participatory, and gender-responsive and youth-oriented cities. And we'll also focus on how climate investments can contribute to alleviating poverty in the most vulnerable groups and help meet other SDGs. We really encourage observers, including city networks representatives, to actively engage on the discussion on this, and especially in the breakout groups, and also in our further thinking on the design of the work of the forum. And yeah, so the most important issue that we need to decide here is venue, and usually that comes with a certain date, which also needs to be taken into consideration, because it cannot be too late, it cannot be too early. So there's some kind of sweet spot of probably August, September, October might even be too late, but where we can organize such a forum. And in Annex 2 of the background document, it lists the possible events and organizations that the SCF can consider. And it's really important that we have a decision on this matter during this meeting, so that we can start with the organization of the forum. We would like to note that there's an offer to host the forum by the UN Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, so UNESCO, in Beirut, Lebanon, and they offer to provide the logistics and the catering. If the forum is to be held in Beirut, it will be a standalone forum, though, and it will be the first time that the forum is held in this region, but we still need additional fundraising to invite resource persons and fund participants. There are also other options that the SCF could consider, including scheduled events by city networks. So I think we always had a discussion whether have a standalone forum where there is benefit of organizing it together with relevant networks. I think that is something that we would like to give to everybody to consider when we talk about these different options. And yeah, we look forward to having views that you might have on this. And also, again, I'd like to call upon city network observers to provide any latest updates if they have any. But we have a breakout group where we can delve into more details and I think, yeah, so there are two aspects when we think about the event that we want to co-organize it with or not, either it's standalone or with some other network, and also what the cost implications of those two versions are. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for the presentation. Mo, any further comments? Thank you very much to both of you for the presentations. There will be a breakout group on this agenda item, the forum, and may I please would ask you to engage actively because we need to have decisions at this very session on the work program and to decide on the time and venue for the forum. So please, when you come back to us from the breakout group, that you really have to tell us, you know, we have a decision or not, because we really need to conclude this agenda item before we close our meeting tomorrow. Paul, please, you have the floor.
Thank you for the information on the breakout groups. But due to the conflicting breakout group timings, I will not be in that group. I'll be in the other group. So I wish to express my point of view now. I think that Beirut is great. I would like to ask, what is the level of support of the Lebanese government? Has that been established? And I think that even if it's not piggybacked on a meeting of one of these city alliances, it's essential, given that we're talking about cities, that these existing organizations be invited to participate in some way, to perhaps something could be worked out, because there are a couple of very powerful networks of cities, and it would be a shame not to have them involved, both in terms of their perspectives, their expertise, and the resources they could bring to bear to enhance the event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that. And indeed, we really need to be very open to inviting, you know, those very active cities that they would make an impact. So we will definitely, the co-facilitators will take this into account in extending the invitations to all different active cities. With that, I would, Dolphin, please, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. For the same reason as Paul, because I will probably most likely not be able to attend the discussion in the breakout group, I would like to say that as a preference, I think we should avoid standalone events. And I think we should also target global events, preferably. And I think our preference would go to the CCFLA or the C40 events.
I'm not getting the last point.
The CCFLA or the C40 events.
Yeah, well, there are two factors here. One is the venue, one is the timeline, the date. So I think you need to take both into account. So we'll see which one that fits better in terms of the timeline and the associated activities, because you know, we have certain days that perhaps are not doable, and I particularly mentioned the period of Ramadan, where it can be difficult to perhaps to do any activities. I think that there was a suggestion for the event in Vienna, which is around towards late May, which coincides with the Eid holiday. So that cannot be really done. Gabby, please.
Thank you. I might also not be able to join the group, so just make quick points. Fully support what Delphine just said, that it should be matched or done in collaboration with city networks. Ideally, we would also not favor having a standalone meeting. Of course, if it's not possible to do it back to back with something else, I guess we have no choice. But yeah, the budget implications, I think we should definitely be aware of. And in any case, we should try to do it together with someone else. And for that, just a question back to the co-facilitators or the secretariat. Has there's a huge list of events. Have you outreached to any of these to understand whether there's even an option that this could be done? Because if all these already say no, there isn't, the breakout group doesn't have to dwell into that. Just
Indeed, there'll be options. There'll be perhaps different scenarios, A, B, and C. If one does not work out, then we can go to the next one. With that, Saini, please.
Yeah, so also on the potential partner, I just want to be, so will the breakout group decide or will it come back to with options to the committee for decision? Or will the breakout group decide when it's going to be? Mohammed already was checking this. So you're not making the decision, you're coming back to us?
The breakout group will discuss it, but then it will be decided here at the plenary when we come back. Yes. All the breakout groups are just for deliberations and discussions. Decisions are all made at the plenary here. With that, I'd like to just conclude here. I'd like to invite our observers on Skype and observers in the room here if they wish to intervene to reflect. Otherwise, you'll be able to also engage in the breakout group. We have the facilities now established that for our remote observers, they can engage in the discussion through the virtual participation system that we have. So you can do that as well. With that, I'd like to just to conclude it here, and let me hand over now to my fellow co-chair, Isma, please.
Thank you, Ayman. So now, according to our schedule, we are moving to the beef of the morning session, which is a discussion on 4 different key deliverables we have, namely on the determination of the needs, the 2020 BA, draft guidance, and then the MRV topic. The first 3 of these will be discussed in the breakout groups today after the lunch. So in the interest of time, we would suggest that we just, at this moment, we just go briefly through these topics. We frame them, and then we continue the discussions after the lunch in the breakout groups. Given that, according to our planning, we should have our lunch at 12:30 in 20 minutes time. So without further ado, I would move to the first of these items, which is the determination of the needs in developing countries related to the implementation of the Convention and Paris Agreement. This is our new mandate for this year. It was decided in COP24. I think it is decision number 4, and we will need to start developing and undertaking preparatory work already in this meeting to try to advance the production of the first report of the determination of the needs next year. We have already 2 co-facilitators for this topic. We have Zahir and Matthias, who have kindly accepted, volunteered for the challenge. I would like to invite both of you, or as you want to do it, just to have a short introduction to the topic. What would you expect to be discussed in the breakout group that will have 2 hours this afternoon? And what would be your key areas of interest in addressing this new mandate? So Zahir and Matthias, could you just briefly take us through this new challenge?
Matthias is deferring to me. Yeah, thanks very much, Ismail. I mean, we haven't really, Matthias and I haven't really had much engagement on this. We have looked at the document that the Secretariat has presented, and as you see, you have the ideas that you want to have a deliberation on the objective scope, etc. So in essence, I think what we want to do in the breakout group is begin to explore those ideas, but ultimately also come up with something a little bit more concrete that allows us to map out the work that we go forward between now and when we have to deliver the product that we have to deliver. It is a new area, so we haven't really or members haven't really engaged with this item. So it'll be a good opportunity to get also a sense, at least amongst all the members, so that we're all on the same page as we move forward, and that there's no misunderstanding or misinterpretation or misunderstanding of what is the task ahead of us in terms of looking at the issue of the needs. It is also, I imagine it would be also useful for us to also maybe contemplate a discussion in that breakout in terms of how we then also link up with the other work that is going on. We were also made aware that some work has been done in the adaptation committee, and I imagine this needs issue is being dealt with in various other forums or within or bodies of this. So how do we then also align that those streams flow back into this one stream that we have here and that. So the intention is by having that discussion, we'll address those three bullet points that you have on there, but with the idea to come up with some kind of a draft TORs and some ideas about the timelines and exactly that, you know, what is the intention of what we want to do, so that we can also start initiating or getting the Secretariat to start looking at initiating some work in that. Well, that's just preliminary. We haven't really had the discussion, but Matthias, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add from this.
Thanks. And could I also just first of all say thanks to colleagues for and to Sahir in particular for being given this opportunity to work on this new task from the COP, and I look forward to diving into this potentially wide area of work and look forward to hearing colleagues' views in the breakout groups, and hopefully by the end of tomorrow we'll have something which we can then take forward together with the Secretariat intersessionally and bring forward to our next meeting, and maybe even have a short report on where we are in the margins of the SBs in June. So I look forward to continuing discussions. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Members, any brief reactions, just to have ideas in the back of our minds before we go for the lunch? Zaid, Mohammed?
Sorry, Isma, for coming back. Just another point. I think it'll be also useful for us when we do go into the breakout. At least, I mean, you know, we all have our own ideas, but I wouldn't want us to spend a lot of time in terms of trying to interpret the mandates and reinterpret mandates or stuff like that. If I can just, I know people might want to do that, but I would rather have that we focus more on the substance rather than you know, debating, because we can go down a wrong path if we continue in that vein. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that. And Mohammed, you want to come in?
Thank you so much, Ismo. Thank you so much for colleagues who will be taking this responsibility. As there is an overlap between the two breakout groups, I just want to share some few points that I think are a reflection of what I think is important to take into consideration. I thank the Secretariat for the document that they have prepared on the linkages, which highlights the work of the thematic bodies in relation to some of the issues that the Standing Committee work on. So I think this will be an interesting component. But having said that, I think we have a mandate, so even if the thematic bodies are still struggling in identifying their own stuff, then we should not be waiting for them to bring information, but rather encouraging them to do it. If they don't do it, we have to fill in the gap. So this is the first point. The second point, we also need to build on experience that we have in the BA. I mean, the BA is big report, and it is a flagship report, be it on the structure of the BA and the elements that they have included in there, because it gives us, or it will give colleagues also some information on the methodology that was followed, the structure of the report and how it was put forward, and I think having like a line of thinking that is similar in the outcomes of the Standing Committee on Finance would be like a good thing to consider. So I know that Seni is here, and he can also assist in giving some of the good ideas on the structure. I will not jump in the content because content is content, but I think those are 2 points that I wanted to highlight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any brief reactions from the members, Peter? Okay. Well, Peter, followed by Seni.
I think it's a good start of the work. I think we also have to realize that this is the first one, and as with the BA, it has evolved over time. So I think it's good that we make a good start, and also realize that over time we probably need to evolve this product as well, and not reinterpreting the mandate that was given. I think it's always a good start. I mean, it's a report on the determination of needs. I think that could be pretty straightforward. There's no room for interpretation there. One of the things that, and we had this discussion also this morning, is that who is this for? And in all its wisdom, I think that is something that the COP gave this mandate to us. But I think that is something that we need to keep in mind. Who is this useful for? And who is going to use this product and for what? And I think as Zahir this morning said, the BA. And we had a discussion about this yesterday. And if you want to get money, that's it doesn't tell you. And if you go to a bank with the BA and said, then they're like, what is this? We don't know what this is. So one of the questions is, so who is this needs determination then for, and how can it be useful? And I think it could be good to, we have Zahir here who says, it's his job to raise money. So how can we make this useful for him? And so that if you have this report, then it will actually, help countries, for instance, South Africa, to raise funding, or at least need, to show what is needed. And that will be, I think, a litmus test of, are we making a useful product, maybe? So thank you.
Thanks. And Seni?
Yes, I really wanted to take this opportunity because this is an historic moment. It is truly an historic moment for not just the SCF, but for the process. This is actually a moment Ditas has been looking for the last 20 years. She's really been looking for a report on, of some work to start on needs. And it's interesting that it just, the mandate was given. And at the same time, I think it's very important for the SCF to reflect, because it shows the degree of confidence that the COP has in the SCF to lead that work. So that's also a great responsibility for the SCF. And I really, colleagues, this is not a light. If the BA was and is a flagship, well, this one is, I don't even know, is a mother of flagship. I don't have a term for that, but it's very important because there have been a number of processes, and you have identified some in the annex. Whether the NDCs, the NAPs, and even the GCF country programs, and the pilot project of the Secretariat itself on the work, and where some of us are very and will be very much interested are a better understanding of the methodologies which are there, and comparability in methodologies for assessing needs and what numbers come out of it. If you were, for instance, to just make a sum of figures which are there in the NDCs, for some countries you get an amount which is as as high as the GDP of that country. And you ask yourself, I mean, what methodologies was used? And it's very hard to compare two reports, sometimes countries in the same region or countries who have actually identified the same priorities. So I would hope that, again, on top of going beyond just an addition of figures, we would get a better sense of the methodologies, and that we will sort of try to have best practices in identifying methodologies, or maybe even come up with methodology that can enhance and guide countries in preparing their reports. There are a number of reports that they have to prepare. So I'm sure now I'm calling for an exercise which is evidence-based, science-based, extremely technical in nature, at least in that area. Countries are free to have to be ambitious. They're really free to be ambitious and come up with whatever ambition that they want to present. But I think it's very important that we have assessment methodologies and which then are robust and that can be replicated, because at one point or another you need to aggregate those figures, and you cannot aggregate figures if methodologies are not, if not common, at least comparable, because then it is not, so that's a first point which is extremely important. The second is, of course, bearing in mind that this will have direct consequence on a number of ongoing processes here. For instance, in the operating entities, at least in the replenishment cycle of the GCF, there's always a need to have an understanding of the depth of the pipeline, or of the pipeline which is there. And any financial institution involved in a replenishment process will do that work. And so I'm sure that this work, or the output of this work, can be an extremely important input in the replenishment of the GCF, in the funding of, or hopefully in the sustainable funding of the adaptation fund, in the setting of the new collective goal. So there, and most of those processes right now lack this robust quantitative evidence base, and it doesn't help the process, it doesn't help the countries, because the whole issue of adequacy of resources per the Paris Agreement objectives. And finally, I think we've been asking ourselves, one of the function of the SCF is resource mobilization, but we've never really had an activity to fill that. And I think any serious resource mobilization exercise start with a serious understanding of the needs that you need to satisfy. So I think this is really the first step in working on resource resource mobilization. And I think that we'll hopefully get into the sources which are there, that will not just work on the needs, we'll also try to understand what is there and how we can access what is there. What are the challenges in accessing what is there, and what could be the recommendation in ensuring that there's a better access to what is there? Because really we have the trillions agenda, and we also have, for those who are in need of immediate urgent response, there are already some funds which are available. And unfortunately, we hear that there are a number of challenges when it comes to accessing what is already there. So I hope that it will also be an opportunity to deal with that, which is less theoretical or abstract than the issue of assessing needs, but also trying to reconcile how do you ensure that countries have a better access of what is already there. So you start doing the matching, not just addressing the gap, but the matching of what's there. But I just wanted to take an opportunity to say something, because this has been key for and it's been a demand for the last 20 some years. And again, this is the SCF, and surely it's because of the work of the BA, because I think the COP trusts the SCF now to say, okay, you guys can produce some good reports, but this is more than a report, really.
Thank you, Seini, for reminding us of our past and also for clearly having done your thinking and structuring in a very beautiful way the different elements that are important. And also reminding us that for any quantitative elements coming out of this, we must be based on the best possible available science and evidence. And obviously, in the future also, the transparency framework will be feeding in with information to this process. I still take Sergey very briefly, if you please.
I try to do very brief here and do agree with Hussein that it's historical moment and very challenging. Then I prepared myself for this meeting. A question appeared, needs is about what? About capacity building, about infrastructure, about money altogether, or how to complete NDCs, but I'm afraid that it's not enough for the implementation of the Convention and the Paris Agreement. It's about ambitious. It's not a certain level because nobody knows what this level is now because the ambition should augment and the needs will augment. So why I'm talking about all this? Because it's really a challenge, and here till the beginning we should understand what will be our ambitions in preparing this report. What should be the main message, not to create a whole bibliothèque of different parts of this report, because it's a immense task if we are considering this report in a structured and full scope. That's it.
Thank you. Any other members? No. We are short of time, but given that this is a special moment, I would really like to invite also at this point of time also our observers to make any brief comments if you may wish to. You have access to the breakout groups after the lunch, so of course that will be the opportunity to really go to the details of this. But at this point of time, any comments to give us food for thought? Yes, Joe, please.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Joe Thwaites from the World Resources Institute. I just want to say very briefly, and happy to engage much more in the breakout groups, but we think this is a very important mandate and look forward to supporting the committee's work on this matter. And WRI is planning to undertake research into both approaches to needs determination and also examining ways, as Seini touched on, to link needs with potential sources of finance. We're still very early days in that work, but I'm happy to discuss our initial ideas later this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? No. Virtual participation? Nothing? Okay, so we now finish with this particular agenda sub-item, and as said, it will continue in this plenary at 13 hours and 13:30, 1:30. Moving on briefly to frame on the 2020 BNL assessment, which is agenda item 4A. Next year is again going to be our BA year. It's going to be the 4th BA. It's been a learning process so far. And now we have also a new decision in Katowice, also helping us in framing this. We have 2 co-facilitators for our BA work, Vicky and Seini. Could you just briefly, in the same Same spirit as for the needs. Could you just provide us with very short comments, your thinking before we adjourn? Seni first.
Yeah, I'll do it very briefly. I do want to use the opportunity to also thank all Uti's work on this. I mean, I have these are big shoes to fill in, but I'm very happy with my other very experienced co-facilitator on this. I think the outcome of what we need to deliver at this meeting is quite clear. I mean, it is to agree on the overall approach, the preliminary draft outline, and then to initiate the discussions in a breakout group with research organizations on the work, specifically on 21C. And I think you already elected your co-facilitators. So I think I wouldn't go too much. I mean, we have a lot of work to do, but I'm looking forward to engage during the breakout group. Thanks. Seni, if you want to.
Okay, thanks, Vicky, and also many thanks for reminding us of giving our special thanks to Outi, who I'm sure is listening to us as we speak. And we all know that she checked out, but she never left. Any of the observers at this point of time, any brief comments to help us framing this? Nope. And nothing on the virtual participation either, so we move to 4C on draft guidance. So this is one of our big ongoing annual activities. We do have a little bit different circumstances this year, given that the SCF will need to prepare guidance to the operational entities of the financial mechanism. So this means the two of them, the GCF and the GEF, for the consideration by the COP and the CMA. We also have the issue of the special climate change fund and of the least developed countries fund that are managed by the GEF, where the guidance will be provided through the GEF guidance. But in order to frame this for the afternoon, it is our understanding as the co-chairs that as a new challenge, this is one of the key topics that the breakout group should be discussing on how we're going to be addressing the new mandate of providing guidance both to the COP and to the CMA. Yeah? That's one thing. The second thing is our ever ongoing challenge of being more efficient in providing guidance, on using all the guidance, the wealth of previous guidance that is available out there. There has been this big cleaning operation undertaken by the Secretariat and Randy and Josh and Diane some time ago. This is one of the areas of work where I think we could be really businesslike in improving the quality and in focusing on only those areas of guidance where we think that we are going to be making a value added to the process. Without any further ado, there are also more slides, but I wouldn't like to touch them because I think the key of the mission this afternoon is captured on this slide. Any comments at this point, Randy?
Maybe also kind of fitting under the subheading of improving the efficiency of how we provide guidance. I think it's still probably useful to keep on the table the question of frequency of guidance, which is something that we've discussed as a committee for a while, but never, I think, actually, proposed in our report to the COP for them to consider, whether or not they still want us to prepare draft guidance on an annual basis for both the GCF and the GEF. I mean, my personal, I think, understanding of our discussions to date has been that for the GCF, folks felt like it was not the time to that folks still wanted to continue giving annual guidance at this point in the GCF's existence, but for the GEF, there seemed to be more appetite, let's say, for going to maybe biennial guidance to the GEF, or some frequency, something less frequent than annual guidance to the GEF.
Thank you. I have Peter, and then I'm not sure whether it was Tori or Gabby who were first. So Peter, Gabby, and Tori.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I strongly support Randy's idea of looking also at the frequency. I think, yeah, now is really the time, especially on the GEF side. We just had the replenishment. We already gave guidance right after the replenishment. And I think now is really the time to look at, do we need to do this on an annual basis? There are other conventions that also do this on a biannual basis. I think that works really well. So that's one thing. On the other aspect, on the sort of the process, I think that merits also. I think that merits also a discussion, because I think we all agree that it's good to have draft guidance and that it's good to have these discussions, although we might differ of opinion on what should be in the guidance. But that we all have comments on the process, where it's a very elaborate process, and I think not very efficient opening up discussions. And in the background note on this item, I think the two proposals put forward on sort of really being more vigilant on sort of getting the input on time, asking, reaching out to other bodies to explain how the process is. When I hear, for instance, that the AC is considering to provide guidance to some of the operating entities, I don't know how they want to do that, but if they deliver it on time to the SCF, we can discuss it here in a broader context of what kind of guidance we want to give to the operating entity. So we're looking at that process. And another thing that we already touched upon is how to give guidance this time, because it's getting more complicated, probably with guidance prepared for different for the COP and the CMA, and some of it. I hope that most of the guidance that we give, although it's a COP or CMA, it doesn't matter whether it's COP or CMA, it can apply for both. But there might be exceptions where we need to give specific guidance from the CMA to the GEF. But that's another thing that we, I think, need to discuss in this breakout group. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabby.
Thank you, Ismo. Just based on the experience from other conventions, I highly recommend that the breakout group, because I don't know if I can join it, focuses on how the CBD currently does the process, because they already have this issue for many years with the two agreements that are under the protocols that are under the CBD, and it's very well established and works really well. I've negotiated that multiple times already as well, so it works smooth, and I would recommend you just follow that the SCF recommends that the COP of UNFCCC and the CMA follow the same logic. And then it's more or less you just have one main body of guidance, and if an agreement wants to add specific elements which are relevant for that agreement, then it's simply annexed to the UNFCCC guidance and not touched by the convention itself. And that ensures the integrity of that other agreement. With regards to the frequency, also other conventions, as Peter mentioned, are on a biannual basis for the GEF. Happy to discuss it, but if it's evident that there's no consensus, since this has been discussed so many times already, I would, let's try to find consensus on it. If there's none, just continue, because otherwise we just use a lot of time on a discussion that's been retabled multiple times already.
Thank you, Gabby, for that very pragmatic proposition, and we hope that something along those lines could be considered by the committee. I have Toro next, please.
Thank you, co-chairs, and I'm pleased to assume the role of co-facilitator on this draft guidance from developed country, together with Diane, who is unfortunately absent this session. And I'm really looking forward to discussing with all of you in the previous breakout session. But I'd like to see that this draft guidance is a very important tool to assure the communication between the operating entities and SCF. So we'd like to see once again why we have such a guidance, and then we'd like to see this as a whole picture and a bigger picture, and then think about what to do, what to recommend to this operating entity. So this is my problematic. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have 4 more requests for floor. I have Mohammed, Zahir, Delphine, and Ivan. Mohammed.
Thank you so much, Ismo. I know that we'll have a discussion. Hopefully, I'll be able to attend because it's at the same time happening with something that is very important, the 2.1c. But I want to just highlight the following. Most of the other agreements they do their CUPs every 2 years. So that's why they give their guidance every 2 years. This is the number one. The second one is the reality is the GCF is still in the building phase of its policies. So the policies they put forward, countries have to reflect on. It is not only the 24 members or the 48 members that are sitting there, but the parties who are affected by those policies need also to reflect on those policies and the implementation of those policies on a regular basis, because again, the GCF is, as one friend and colleague was saying, we are building the plane while we're flying it. So it makes very much sense that the GCF gets guidance every 1 year. This is the second point. The third point, the GEF it has some established policies, but again, every replenishment, there are new policies coming in from the donor or the contributors. So giving guidance every 2 years does not really reflect the reality that the GEF has some changing policies every 4 years, which has an implication on the countries that are getting or benefiting from the GEF. So this is another reality that we have to think of. So I do understand from a contributor side, nobody would want to have their policies or the ideas that they're putting forward being criticized or being assessed. But from the beneficiary side, which is a very important element, that their views have to be reflected. Of course, there are a lot of guidance that are repeated, and this means that the issues that were raised were not tackled by the institutions. So a repetition of the guidance does not mean that people don't have anything to say, but that means that the gap or the issue that they're facing is still there and it continues to stay. So it is important also to remind the implementing entities of the financial mechanism that this is a crucial element. Otherwise, if you don't like climate change, we can always say that. So you cannot come from one side, say we need to raise the ambition, we need to do this, and when it comes to the implementation side of the means of implementation, then we are saying, we don't want to have a discussion on those elements. We don't want to have a discussion on the policies to the institutions that provide support, and we can do that every 2 years or every 4 years. Doesn't make sense. So just for me, I'm just saying my point of view, and I think also that applies to the African group on that. Those are important elements that we need to keep in mind. Looking at other institutions, how they provide guidance is something that we can look at, yes, but this does not mean that we have to follow them. There are different challenges and different requirements from each agreement and convention. Chemicals have their own requirements and their own process. Biodiversity has a longer process. Climate change is a kind of a very short-term, very urgent actions to be taken. So we have to take this also into consideration. Yes, it is a painful exercise in the SCF and in the COP, but it is painful because countries do really have a huge interest, and they are looking into these institutions as main player for having this enabling environment for climate action in its general format. So I am not in favor of discussing frequency because I think it is not relevant now. GCF is still in the process of building, and GEF changing its policies every 4 years. On the content, we can work on streamlining, yes, but also with the understanding of the caveats and the elements that I have just mentioned. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Zahir, please.
Thank you very much. Just following up on what Mohammed had said, I think one needs to understand that, and I don't want to repeat what Titas always used to tell us about the operating entities of the financial mechanism, and that we operate on and we provide guidance in that. And the problem, if you look at it, is you look at the history of these funds. And I've been engaged both from a perspective of giving guidance, but also from a perspective of being a contributor to many of these funds. So if you look at the GEF, we've had from each cycle, 5, 6, 7, a steady decline in the financing that has been provided for these funds. But this decline has been complemented with a continuous increase in conditionalities and increases in co-financing, etc. Now, these are operating entities of the financial mechanism. They're accountable to this body. We are required to give guidance on that. We can't say that we just give guidance every 2 years. It becomes even more imperative when you have a fund that is your operating entity and allocations to countries are cut by 46%. 46%, yet there's a demand for greater ambition through the Paris Agreement and the NDCs and that, yet you're getting 46% less than. I give the case of South Africa, and I'll be open. Over the next 4 years, my allocation for climate change is $10 million. This is what the operating entity of the financial mechanism of this convention is prepared to provide. And linked to that, they've said that, okay, well, you will get greater impact because we will have all these impact programs. Well, we've tried. I've now received 2 letters of rejection from the GEF on impact programs. So, and we are a country with a much higher allocation. I shudder to think what other countries in Africa must be experiencing on that. So it's important to give guidance. It's important to give guidance because the implications of many of these replenishments mean increased co-financing requirements, increased responsibilities of conditions, financing conditions for us to access the. Now, in the replenishments of the GEF, the argument was made is that, well, you don't need to replenish the GEF so much on climate because you now have the GCF. The reality on the GCF side is that a 10 billion pledge, of which 2 billion is not being fulfilled, and foreign currency exchanges, and so 7 billion is what you're really going to materialize in that process. So there's also a decline in that. I don't think that the scenario is very positive that you have to say, well, we don't have to give any more guidance, or we can give guidance every 2 years. The situation is much graver than that. Now, whether we can agree on guidance is a different matter. And that's a matter that we have in, but I think it's imperative for us, if these are the operating entities of the convention, if we are expecting greater ambition by developing countries, if these are the means of implementation by which you achieve the greater ambition, and if these means are being diminished, then it becomes imperative on us to give guidance. It's only clear. It's not just a arbitrary process because others give 2 years, or I haven't engaged in the CBD, so I imagine maybe the CBD parties are very happy with what they're getting allocated for. I know it's not the case, but there has been declines in all of these, but we're not here dealing with the CBD, and because CBD meets every 1 to 2 years. So I don't want us to have a big debate as to whether we give guidance every 2 years or 1 year. It's important that we give guidance, and even more so, it's more imperative that we give guidance, especially to things like the GCF when it's in its formative years, and not later down the road once it's formed itself into, and then we sit with the same problem like we have with the GEF, where people say, oh, well, we give the same guidance. And the reality is that we give the same guidance continuously because that guidance has not been followed, or they could not fulfill those guidance. So I will leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Delphine?
Yes, thank you. Yes, guidance is indeed very important, but I think it is important as an advisory committee that we, as the SCF, provide guidance efficiently. And I think on that, and it's been raised by many of you, I think having timely input is very important so that the SCF doesn't produce draft guidance at the end of the day with a lot of brackets, with annexes that are not facilitate the negotiation. So I think this year I would expect that we produce guidance in a form that can smoothen the process at the COP. And for that, and it's been raised by colleagues, I think we need to focus on new guidance. Also, we need to have common guidance for the COP and the CMA, for the GCF and the GEF, where it can be common and differentiated when or as need be.
Thank you. Iván, gracias por esperar. Tienes la palabra.
This is a surrogate because my nameplate fell.
Oh, sorry.
I lost my nameplate, but I didn't want to
right?
lose my voice. And Ivan very kindly loaned me his, so I wouldn't lose my voice. I think that depends on the organization. Organizations are at different stages in their maturation, and they need different advice at different stages. There's different types of advice. I think, for example, that the Green Climate Fund urgently needs advice, and it needs it this year, not next year. And I think that it's our responsibility to give that advice. I can think of 5 things that are critical. This is coming off the presidency last year, the co-chairmanship, that are critical. And we have to look at the way change takes place in these organizations. It takes place when a critical mass starts to form. It comes out of here in the advice. It comes out of the COPE. It comes out of SBI saying something. It comes out of board meetings when people make interventions. But it's not one intervention. You need to get a critical mass going. Then all of a sudden there's a consensus that this needs to be done. But it doesn't start automatically. And so I think that this we should be patient. Send out the guidance, and if the guidance isn't met immediately, keep working at it, especially if it's something really important for the success of the organization. There's a minimalist tendency here that preoccupies me a bit. I'm not losing sleep over it yet, but it preoccupies me a bit. Oh, let's do the biennial assessment. Maybe that we should retire the biennial assessment. Let's do the forum every 2 years. Do we really want to do this guidance? Well, let's do the guidance every 2 years. There's a point at which minimalism becomes abolitionism. And so if people don't believe in this committee, let someone else come here who really likes this committee and wants it to work and thinks it can make a good contribution. So let's not try to shirk our functions. So we say, revise the functions. Let's scratch this one off, scratch this one off, scratch the other one off. No, I think that climate finance has not been solved. While climate finance has not been solved, there's many things that we can do as the Standing Committee on Finance of the Convention to contribute to climate finance. Some areas like loss and damage, we're still in the Stone Age. The loss and damage response of the international community is characterized by too little and too late, and too out of touch with the reality of the types of disasters that take place today in places like Dominica or St. Martin's or Mozambique as we speak. Thank you.
Thank you all for providing us with your thoughts before we break. I'm not, well, Matthias, but very shortly, please.
Sorry, Paul, I'm very happy to be here, and I'm happy, hope we all will be contributing to the work of the committee. Just a short reflection. I'm sorry to take the floor on this, but you know, I think it's interesting to note the discussions we've had on the sort of the mandates of this committee, and the fact that we were, as many colleagues pointed out earlier this morning, that we were sort of set up in order to mobilize financing for climate action. Now, looking at the BA, you know, we have the funds running through the climate funds is a small, very small amount of the total funds available. So, how do we divide our time in proportion to where the funding actually is? And looking maybe specifically to the, what is it, $71 trillion, which are under assets in 2016, how do we shift those flows? I think the more we can focus our discussion on that, I'd be happy to contribute to that kind of discussion. Not, of course, diminishing the value of guidance as such, but, let's keep our focus on where the financing actually is.
Thank you, Matthias, for reminding us of the bigger picture, while obviously this is part of our mandate. Mo, you want to come back on this?
Thank you so much. Very quickly, Matthias, this is a very good idea. We can give guidance to the private sector. I don't mind. And the other institutions, I would be very happy, but just speak to other colleagues around you. And then if they are happy, we can do that. But it is part of the work that we are providing also. In the different outcomes, not only the guidance for the GCF and the GEF, but also the other outcomes gives kind of message. Just very quickly on the issue of differentiation between the CMA and the COP and thing, I think this is already being established. It's already been agreed. It is an understanding. The legal arrangement only is between the COP and the GEF and the COP and the GCF. So just to be clear, we are not trying to have two different guidances. And if it is the same, if there is nothing new coming from the CMA, then it is the same guidance going out. So you don't need to have like this is CMA and this is the COP. This is guidance coming to the operating entities. They have to report back as operating entities to those to the COP on what guidance has the COP provided, because the legal arrangement is very clear. Just wanted to highlight those points, and I'm sure that within the discussion we'll be having more inputs. A quick comment on we shouldn't be sending annexes or brackets. I'm fully support that, Delphine. So anything parties put will have to be taken in. Anything comes from anybody who wants to have guidance, because we represent constituencies. So if I put something, nobody should object to my input. The same applies also like across the board. So if you want to have some guidance from you to the GCF, I will not object to it. If I have guidance that I'm going to put to the GCF or the GEF, nobody else should object to my guidance. So we have a long list of agreed guidance. I'm fine with that. And I think this should be the mode of work rather than objecting to each other's inputs. Thank you.
Well, let's hope that this year we manage to send unbracketed text on guidance to the COP. I still take Seni and Randy, but then I really want to close this and move on in the interest of time. So very briefly, please.
I actually supported Gabi's point, which said, if there's no consensus, let's move on. There's no consensus. We're having guidance every year. Let's move on. But there was a point I'm very, and because I might not be in one of the breakout, there's this idea that somehow the funds which are under the purview of the convention is so small relatively to the bigger funds that that they're irrelevant, or we must dedicate more time. Like, let's say under the convention, it's 2-3 billion. And you have 3 trillion outside, so that somehow we should dedicate more efforts because there are 3 trillions. In reality, it's a bit more complicated than that, because if you are in a landlocked LDC or a seed, having access to the trillion, your enabling environment is not as such that you'll be accessing those trillions of dollars. And you might not actually need that, because most of the trillions actually are for mitigation. As we have shown again in ours, most of that trillion is for mitigation, and it's for large countries, and it's for countries who have a enabling environment which gives all the signals to private sector. Now, if you are an LDC, it might be adaptation that you need, and adaptation and grants. So that very small part, having access to that very short, that very small amount, is what really is a matter of life and death for you. And we need to also, and a lot of work needs to happen there in terms of having access. So I think it's about how you dedicate enough time for both the trillions agenda and at the same time what I call just accessing the finance which is there. The two are quite important. So they're not mutually exclusive. They're actually, the two are quite important, and the two have challenges which are commensurate in and of themselves.
Randy, you wanted to come in? Paul, Ivan, which one?
Yes.
But very briefly, please.
It's the GRULAC chair. If we look at tomorrow, since you were going to rethink tomorrow, on the determining the needs of the first report, the needs of developing countries, we have 2 hours today and an hour and 15 minutes tomorrow. That's 3 hours and 15 minutes. On the forum, we have EDEM, 3 hours and 15 minutes. I would suggest that one of those 1 hour and 15 minute slots be devoted to guidance to the financial entities, because we're not going to have time to discuss that. And I don't know if we can discuss the forum for 3 hours and 15 minutes.
Paul, may I just, I think you have the old version, because there has been an update to the schedule, and we have the guidance in a breakout group this afternoon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for bringing me up to date, sir.
Okay, thanks. And I want to give the floor to Ayman just briefly.
Thank you very much. And Paul, you asked for it. Thank you very much for raising this. May I propose that, Paul, you would be co-facilitating this agenda item on behalf of developing countries, since Diane is absent. So if you could kindly facilitate this breakout group for us this time around, we'd really appreciate it. And
which item, sir?
The guidance to the operating.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for accepting.
I feel happy now.
Appreciate it. Are you accepting or objecting?
I feel happy now.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Okay, thanks, Paul and Ayman. I suggest that we have in the agenda now the MRV beyond the BA, but in the interest of time, I suggest that, as I mentioned earlier today, we're going to be reworking this evening the agenda for tomorrow. So we are already half an hour late. I suggest that we move the MRV for tomorrow morning, and we break now for lunch. We will be coming back in the afternoon for the breakout sessions, and the Secretariat is going to just give you some information on the housekeeping rules. And please.
Thank you, Chair. So we're adjusting the schedule for this afternoon. So we're starting, the breakout groups will start at 2 o'clock. So from 2 to 3:45, breakout group on determination of needs will take place in this room, and the breakout group on 2019 forum would be at the VU 111, the fishbowl room. And then 3:45 to 4 would be coffee break. And from 4 to 5:45, breakout group on the draft guidance will take place here, and breakout group on 2020 BA will take place at the fishbowl room. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lando. Thanks, colleagues. Thanks to our observers. We are adjourned.